Hello, everyone. I'm having a conversation with my friend Arch Warhammer. I'll put a link to his channel in the description about the idea of an EU army, because we're both big fans of history, and I think that we might actually be able to give some quite useful input on this, because I've been spending a lot of time finding out how the EU works as part of the research I've been doing for the Brexit video that I'm planning to do. And I think I've got a much better understanding than I had previously, and I guess this wouldn't have been such a big deal, but I really think the idea of the EU getting its own army is quite a disturbing thought, and I think it's worth going into because it's more the sort of historical context, I think, more than anything. But there are also like distinct plans and distinct not plans, distinct issues that I think we're going to be moving into that need consideration. How are you doing, Arch?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, always. So let's start with the Times article. Here, let me just get a drink, sorry. Before I start talking. So to establish the context of basically this article, this is obviously the Brexit vote coming up, which, if anyone doesn't know somehow, and the Times is a very reputable source. As you can see, I have an account with them that I have to pay for each month because this is actually the sort of high-class journalism that we expect in the UK. These are the people who do the good work. That's why I pay them, you know. And so when they are the ones that break the news that the EU army plans have been kept secret from voters until after the referendum, the day after the referendum, in fact, it's something I'm willing to treat with a great deal of credence.
Certainly, and it's just, because on one hand, keeping it secret is done for obvious reasons, because this is going to be a rather divisive subject.
Of course.
But this is really the sort of information that the voters should have available to them, since it is of such massive importance to all of the countries in the European Union, especially Britain, that's voting potentially to leave.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a tremendously important issue and not just and not just because it's something people are going to have to pay for. You know, I think we're going to have to start like putting our lenses of power dynamics on and look at where the strength lies in a more sort of Machiavellian Game of Thrones sort of manner, because it's really not sensible to have a largely undemocratic organization that has a particular attitude and culture within it that seems to be, and I can't help but feel they don't really care much what the average person thinks. They really don't care for democracy all that much. And I realize that I'm saying, well, this is just the general impression of the culture that you've seen. You've not been there, and I haven't been there, but I've been listening to people who work there. I mean, if you watch Brexit the movie, you've got multiple MEPs from Britain who are saying, look, these people just don't. They're kind of up themselves, basically. They don't think the common man knows what he's doing, and they've got a plan and they're working towards it. I mean, it's obvious they have a plan, and there's this kind of culture of agreement that all of these people know best and should be the ones leading the way, which, I mean, in itself probably would be a noble thing, but what they're looking at is like a macro historical sort of scale. And so they don't care what the people on the ground do because they're not the ones written about in history books, I think. It doesn't matter if they suffer as long as the European project comes to fruition, because in 500 years' time, it'll look great. That's the impression they're giving across. And I mean, hey, it could be completely wrong, but I've not seen anything that makes it sound like that's completely wrong. What's your opinion?
No, I think you're onto something, because it does seem from their actions that they, like you said, have a plan. That plan might be a good plan in the long run. Like, the European Union as a nation might be an incredible nation, but the problem is that's a lot of maybes and a lot of possibilities, and we're going to be asked to sacrifice a lot for these maybes.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the fact that it's not particularly democratic in and of itself really worries me. I mean, I can't see how it won't develop into a tyranny. What would be the forces acting within the EU that prevents the tyranny of the EU?
Well, that's the other problem, because these people might have the best of intentions. They might. Maybe this would be a benevolent dictatorship. Entirely possible.
Yes,
Alternatively, it's entirely possible that they might want to have all of the power so they can do whatever the fuck they want to.
But not just that. Dan Carlin always makes the point, and it's a fantastic point. Okay, you might be wonderful, but you will eventually die.
Yeah, that as well.
You know, if you fall on hard times, a dictatorship could form. You know, it could be incredibly right-wing. Cultures change. You know, people become left and right in general over time, depending on generally their material circumstances. You know, when they're having hard times, they become right-wing. When they're having good times, they become liberal overall. You know, and so it's it's natural. It's completely natural that would be the case. And if they fall on hard times, get some terrible right-wing dictatorship, and then some, what's stopping terrible things from happening? So. It just seems like a terrible idea, doesn't it?
Like I told you just before we started this, I'm not against the idea of a European army per se. I just don't think it's the EU that should have control over this army.
Well, they're trying to set themselves up as the sovereigns, aren't they? I mean, they want to be the state. So, I mean, and that just in case anyone's not aware, that is exactly what they are doing. You know, you don't create common borders policy, common markets, common like policies all across the EU, like laws, and then try to then set up a European army if you're not trying to become a state. I mean, there's just no doubt about that in case anyone needed persuading. They would have to be the ones in control of the army, of course. So, if it is a good idea with them not controlling it, that's simply not going to happen. So, it's not, I don't think it's a consideration we can reasonably expect.
No, it would have to be a substitute for NATO, essentially, a defense treaty.
Yeah. But again, I don't think it's going to be that, because these soldiers will be recruited from wherever and paid by the EU through tax revenue collected from the constituent provinces, what they would be.
Yes, and this would be indeed the ideal army to keep peace within Europe, because let's say that those damn pesky Brits start rebelling and acting up. Well, just send Germans to suppress them.
Yeah, just send poor people from Eastern Europe and pay them well. Good God, They're not going to give a fuck about the people they're occupying. Especially they'll propagandize them anyway. They'll just lie to them.
Of course, once you join the European army, you are going to be indoctrinated, because all armies do this. This is a natural part of joining any army.
Yeah, but normally it's for the national good, to protect the homeland. So it's hard to oppress your own people with your own, an army that's from that place. They've got a natural inclination away from it. They're naturally kinder to the population. On average, in general, blah, blah, blah. We're talking in general terms, but if when you're looking at this from like a sort of historical perspective, that is what happens overall. And it's just a case of, incentives. People don't generally want to be killing their own countrymen.
Exactly. But if you take someone from another part of the European Union
and simply just tell them,
exactly, and then you inform them that these people are doing something horrible and we need to protect them from themselves. Not like this is a new thing. This has happened on multiple occasions previously, so...
Yeah, it's like clockwork. You see this happen time after time after time, and like this is what the Romans would do. You recruit troops in Syria and you station them in Britain. Every empire does this. It's it's just mandatory. You've got to do that. It's the best way to keep control of things. And the people who are now occupying the area, they now have an interest in occupying the area. A, they're probably being paid quite well to do it, as auxiliaries or whatever. But B, they don't really know anyone else. They spend all the time together. It takes a long time to become integrated into a new population. They'll certainly be able to quell any revolts, however long they last.
And they'll do so without really caring. Because, again, if you are a foreign occupation force, then the local population is not going to like you. As such, you have virtually no opportunities to bond with local populations. The only people you're going to bond with are your other soldiers, your commander-minging officers, etc.
You're going to see them as the enemy.
Exactly.
That's the thing. You're going to see them as the problem. It's like with the US in Iraq. The Iraqis weren't really that pleased to see them. You know, it's just it's such a bad idea to have, and that's the thing, right? If the EU Commission was like directly elected by the constituent nations, at least it would have a leg to stand on. You know, the constituent nations would be sending their representatives who could actually make the decisions, because that's the problem I really have with EU in regards to the whole anti-democratic nature of it. The MEPs cannot propose or repeal legislation. That to me is mental, because what that means is the people, the MEPs are the people in the countries actually vote for. So they're sent there to advocate for their interests, to represent the country and the interest that the platform they were running on. You know, so if they run on a platform of what we're going to do is repeal this terrible harsh tax that's paying for the EU army, and that's a wildly popular idea, you know, maybe not necessarily, you know, scrap it, but, you know, scale it down so it's a lot weaker than the, you know, individual national governments or something, you know, and it can be like the core that all of the others fucking form around or something. But no, you've got no control of that, so they couldn't. Like, bureaucratically, there would be no way for them to make that happen unless the commission themselves, they are admittedly elected from the heads of state, but when you see the heads of state, and they're not necessarily fucking trustworthy. Look at Cameron, he's like, oh, I'm a Eurosceptic, but vote Remain. Fuck off, Cameron, you're a shill. You know, you're lying to people when you say you're Eurosceptic if you're saying vote Remain. That's just fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, and I really take issue with the whole thing that they are elected from amongst countries' leaders. They are. Yeah. However, there are so many of these leaders that literally see the EU as this kind of fallback post. When they're done with their previous political career, they're going to head to the EU. And the only way they're going to get into the EU is being pro-EU before that point, which means you build up a core of people that all believe in the same ideology and really think that this has to happen.
Yeah. There is a zeitgeist within the political class, and it's overwhelmingly pro-EU. I mean, the whole, like, unsurprisingly, the EU is made up of very pro-EU people. You know, so
such an oddity.
I really do not see them at any point voting to disband their own army. I mean, the idea that someone would just give up power willingly like that is absurd. It's not going to happen. You know, especially as the average voter has no control over what they do. So the average voter has no way of making them do it. They can't unelect them. They can't vote for or against them, you know? Or even if they could, it would be in a very indirect and probably very ineffective way. You know, so it's not going to happen. And then you've got, I mean, you would have to have international riots to gain the attention of these people and make them think, okay, maybe we might get lynched, you know. And then they've still got this military force, so it's just like that would be a very good suppressing force. It'd be very effective. You know, you would literally have troops, poor people from different countries, suppressing other people and getting fairly wealthy off it. You know, and who could blame them? They'd been lied to about these people anyway, so it doesn't matter. You know, it's not their fault necessarily because they don't know the truth. You know, they're acting on false premises. So it's like, you know, it's not necessarily they're necessarily being immoral. You know, they might think they're suppressing terrorists or something. You know, so you can't necessarily blame these people. And they're piss poor. They want money. You know, it's just, oh man, the whole thing's just a bad fucking idea. It's like the Marian reforms all over again. It was inevitably going to lead to the peasant, like the plebs marching on Rome under a dictator. You fucking muppet.
The simple fact is that the European Union, while I still think that some sort of European Union is probably a good idea. However, the way it's currently set up was never meant to last. The European Union and NATO was formed as a direct response to the situation the world was in at the time, which was highly unstable, which is why you needed member countries with vetoes, etc., so that the various countries could feel safe in their political and thereby military power. However, we're not in the 90s and 70s any longer.
Yeah, it's absurd. And I mean, how do you think America would react if two members of NATO decided to go to war with each other?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure.
They would undoubtedly step in. Surely, you know, they'd be like, no, this is going to be solved through mediation, surely.
Yeah, probably.
You know, I mean, if they can prevent Israel from destroying the Egyptian Third Army with a phone call, and those people really hate each other, you know, they're surely going to be able to diplomatically end any conflict between a European nation and NATO.
The scary thing is, though, like this would require a proper break inside the EU, because the nightmare scenario today, as unlikely as it is not a war with Russia or anything. Russia cannot fight the West, not today.
No.
But the European Union somehow striking sparks with the United States would be the true horror scenario, because these are two massively powerful military nations.
Yep. And you know what? This was actually predicted in this book called The Last and First Men, written by a sci-fi author, who he had a good knowledge of politics at the time, and he predicted like the TPP, the TPIP, you know, just sort of international business world order that would just end up superseding governments. We're seeing it, and he predicted this. And he also predicted that Europe and the United States would go to war and that the United States would win, and I think they probably would. And so it's just one of those things where it would be a long, drawn-out conflict. It would be horrible, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it probably wouldn't be within our lifetimes, but you don't want the European state, especially if they've got delusions of fucking grandeur. Think of the Roman Empire. You know, that's on their fucking minds. It'll be like Rome again. We'll have united Europe. Oh, brilliant.
Additionally, they can justify it quite easily. They go like, well, we have improved Europe by unifying it. Yes. So next step, obviously, is humanity.
Yeah. I mean, they're tremendous patrons of the arts, and don't get me wrong, that is to their credit. But it shows you also where their loyalties lie. You know they're ridiculously obsessive about it, and I think it's because it's populated largely with these politicians who are probably have always been wealthy and are certainly wealthy now because they get paid more than our politician, more than our prime minister, I think, if I recall correctly. I'd have to check that though, but they are well paid. Everyone there is well paid, and they also spend a lot of money on science research, which, don't get me wrong, it's a good idea. Think tanks and whatnot, it's good. But that means that when they want a pro-EU opinion, they get a pro-EU opinion, and it's they're using the authority of these people to kind of push this agenda, whether it's right or wrong, and they don't care what the people think. I mean, you see the Lisbon Treaty, the idea, you vote again. What the fuck do you mean, vote again? Are you fucking serious? What, you had the vote, you lost. You can't say vote again.
Well, that's exactly the problem. The European Union, as I said, was designed more as a emergency solution rather than a permanent one, because it is not a free institution by any stretch of the imagination. Their current powers allows them to ignore things that don't go their way, which is a pretty huge problem.
Yeah. So someone in the chat has said that what he thinks Russia can take us on because our armies are dilapidated.
Yes, but the Russian army is even more dilapidated.
I was going to say, you're actually the expert on this because you read about the details of it. I just read the overall and go, right, okay, what's likely to happen?
Anyone who thinks that Russia could currently take the European Union, I'd suggest reading up on their invasion of Georgia, and you will quickly come to the conclusion that the Russian army can barely invade a pantry at the moment.
Well, to be fair, they seem to have been fairly effective in Syria.
Yes, against an enemy with very little to no anti-aircraft weaponry.
Yeah, terrorists who have no means of production or industrial capacity. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm thinking about it, and now I'm like picturing the Rome Total War map, and ISIS is grey, isn't it? ISIS is in grey. ISIS is rebels. ISIS is not a power.
No, and again, the Russians just have a lot of problems with their command structure at the moment, which has not yet been fully fixed since the Georgian War. Like, the Georgian War is a fascinating subject for anyone who's interested in the Russian military and its current state, I suppose, because the Russian special forces, the Spetsnaz, did amazingly well. They managed to carry out some truly complicated maneuvers, and they did so extremely well. While the Russian army, in all due honesty, got stuck on paved roads and sat there for literally days, barely moving, while their air force primarily bombed using outdated maps, bombing empty buildings, and getting shot down by people with rocket launches.
I don't mean to laugh, but the way you say it is funny. Okay, so I don't. Yeah, I think the threat of Russia is overblown as well. I mean, there are also like sort of macro political issues with that as well. I mean, like, who the Russia has got 150 million people, 146 million people, sorry, and they're losing population. They have a sub replacement birth rate. You can't engage in a modern war with a sub replacement birth rate. I mean, what trenches? Are you serious? You know,
Yeah.
it would not. What the hell? Do you think Russia is going to march like 5 million men into Europe? That will take. I mean, A, that would cost the Earth, but B, they'd all get killed. And then what are they going to do?
Yeah,
Are the Russian mothers going to send their sons off to war when they don't have more than one son? You know, it's not going to happen. This is the thing. You have to have positive population growth to be able to sustain any real war, really, but like especially a modern war. People aren't just going to get themselves killed. You know, it's different time. You know, so no, Russia just are not going to invade. I think it's ridiculous.
Yes, and again, the thing is, people keep thinking of Russia as this large manpower nation, you know? They're horribly outnumbered by NATO and America. Horribly.
500 million in Europe alone.
Exactly.
We're 4 times more populous than them. We're God knows how many times richer than them. The idea, and then we've got the United States on our side. Do you think China's going to back Russia in an invasion of Europe?
No.
I mean, exactly. It would be ridiculous. What are you doing? You know, the Chinese and the Russians don't really like each other anyway. They're just like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, aren't they?
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah. So it's just like one of those things where it's like, yeah, the idea of Russia invading Europe, man. There a lot of really important changes would have to happen for that to become viable. You know, basically, like the United States may be splitting into 2 like nations or something, like Republicans and Democrats like finally go, right, okay, we've had enough of each other, we'll just form our own states, you know, split the United States between us, or something stupid or ridiculous like that. You know, it would have to be something major before the Russians became anyway important.
The European Union, like NATO, would have to not be a thing. Like, they could take on any single European nation with a decent chance of success, but the entirety of Europe, no. An entirety of Europe plus America, no. It wouldn't even be funny. I mean, for fuck's sake, the current military of the European Union, which is the NATO and not NATO, the actual military of the European Union, which includes naval forces and aircraft, they outnumber the current standing Russian army. If you add in NATO, it's not even funny.
And Russia is on an economic downswing at the moment, isn't it? That's the problem. Like under Putin, the way the earnings of the average Russian it did really, really well for a long time, which is why he's being liked. But now they're going down, and it's not his fault. You know, I think it's just natural fucking forces or something like that. I don't know why it is. I don't think it's his policies though, which is why he's not losing popularity. But you know, but they are going down.
Certainly, and most of that money comes from their natural gas and oil production, which almost all of which is going to Europe, which, surprisingly enough, would probably cease if there was a European versus Russian war.
Yeah. So the idea that the nations of Europe couldn't independently band together to defeat Russia, I mean, like they had previously done, incidentally. Well, not Russia, Germany, sorry, but like the idea that the nations of Europe couldn't band together to defeat Russia independently is absurd, and that's assuming the United States crumbles to dust tomorrow. You know, of course they could. You know, there is this complete, almost sort of desolation of thought of our own capabilities in Europe, and it really is crazy. You know, Europe is incredibly rich. It has the best technology. It has the best scientists, and it's powerful. Europe could militarize remarkably quickly, I imagine.
Yeah, like granted, right now, this moment, the European army, it has a lot of real challenges when it comes to its command structure. This has been demonstrated when the French has been fucking around in Africa recently. Mm-hmm. However, in a live-fire war with Russia, I don't think these are going to be big enough problems, because the Russians are going to have, if not worse, at the very least equal hardships.
I mean, at the very least, we'd be able to get advisors from America, wouldn't we?
Yes, and of course there are already American army units stationed in Europe.
Yes, of course. But yeah, that's assuming that America as a state dissolves. There will still be the the American military traditions, the institutions, the continuity of experience.
Yes, and we have powerful divisions. Like, as a whole, we have problems, but the first German Netherlands Corps, which is a part of the current European Union military, that's 30,000 men. That's a large armored force, which would be able to break apart, I would bet, anything the Russians could throw at us.
Apparently, they've just sold off all their tanks there, haven't they?
Yes, a large amount of them. However, they have replacements coming in, so...
Yeah, and the thing is, the Americans have got 3,000 tanks just sat out in the fucking Nevada desert, covered in tarpaulin. They would be more than... I mean, the generals actually... was it in 2014? The generals put in a fucking request for them to stop buying them tanks. Yeah, because they had so many tanks they didn't need them. I mean, this was... now I was thinking, fucking what are they doing at the time? I was putting together like this big series of videos that I really still need to do, because I think all of this is genuinely interesting, if not like important to know. But yeah, the Americans would sell us those tanks in a heartbeat, and they would do it on debt, like they did for the Lend-Lease with Britain in World War II. That's what they would fucking do.
Oh yeah, no question. Like, could you imagine? Let's go for the funny one here, because this will piss up a few Americans. Let's say Donald Trump gets elected,
and he refuses to send military anywhere.
Yes, and Europe goes like, "All right, you're not going to send us dudes, but could we buy like 5,000 tanks?"
Yeah, he'll in a heartbeat. He wouldn't even question it. And the thing is, you've got to even question, would the Europeans fight, right? Because if people don't really, I mean, if you need to put millions of Europeans in the field to counter millions of Russians, again, I think it's just ridiculous. But let's assume this happens. Do you think? I mean, the EU could well be a paper tiger. I mean, it could be that they're not going to. It could be that the Russians offer a deal to the individual nations for their freedom, and all they have to do is just not fight for the EU or something like that. It could be that people are, well, actually, yeah, fuck it. I mean, this sort of stuff. People, right? This is the thing. I know that we sound like we're speculating, but what we're talking about are things that have happened before multiple times. I mean, like the example I was thinking of with the American advisor was Xanthippus of Carthage, who Carthage was getting their asses handed to them by the Romans. The Romans had landed in Africa with a strong force, and not that strong though, but they were marching on Carthage. And the Carthaginians, their army was perfectly fine, but their leadership was complete wank. And honestly, I think we would be in that position, right? And so what they did is they went, Sparta, can you send us a guy who knows how to fight or how to command an army? Sparta, obviously, with a strong military tradition, much in the same way the United States has, they would send someone with expertise over, right? This guy Xanthippus goes over, he looks at the Carthaginian army and goes, your army's fine, you suck, stay back and watch me win this. Goes out, crushes the Romans, just devastates them. And it's just like, right, okay, that's the value of good leadership. The whole army of lions led by a donkey and all that sort of saying. The value of good leadership is, and it could well be that in Europe we would have the problem of not having any good leadership because we haven't fought anything major for a long, long time. What are officer corps like? And when we need, thousands of new officers, they're going to be shit. They're not going to know what they're doing. Are there going to be enough officers to train these people? We could find that, when if it did come down to it, we could find ourselves in a position with having a lot of manpower and good soldiers, but just they get butchered because they get moved into stupid positions.
It's a question of scale, because the thing is, our current military and its current performance level, etc., the performance level of the officers and the soldiers, is very, very high. We have large-scale joint military maneuvers, and they have proven themselves that our core units are very, very good. They're probably some of the best trained soldiers in modern history. However, that makes up a very, very small but very solid core of the army. A European war against Russia would most likely be won within months by rapid thrusts of extremely mobile forces. But if we assume that this somehow bogs down, which it might, because war is hard to predict, then all nations are going to start recruiting like crazy. Those forces are going to be massively subpar because there will be no time to train them to the quality of our current troops. At that point, we're going to have World War One, because you'll have tons of poorly
Well,
trained troops
yeah.
that can only really hold trenches and fortified positions.
Yeah, because what we're talking about is basically a reverse of World War One and World War Two, aren't we? Because in World War Two, the British had a very highly trained force of men, but they were very small. You know, the
Yes.
colonial forces, and they were sent to France as the expeditionary force, weren't they?
Yep.
And they did very well, but they were tiny, and the Germans had like 500,000 men or something who weren't very good, but you know, they're not awful or anything, but like there was 500,000 of them. You know, so I think that would probably happen initially, and then you're right, World War One would occur, and then it would just be everything entrenched everywhere because nobody can drop a bomb through the earth, I guess.
Yeah, you simply would end up in a situation where the elite troops would be hoarded very carefully, and then you would have literally massed attacks with large amounts of men trying to make an opening. After which the cavalry, which would be the elite units with their high-tech main battle tanks, would try to pour through. Because in that kind of situation, most nations would not risk their expensive hardware. Because you got to remember, a Leopard A7 costs so freaking much that most military commanders will not deploy one of these main battle tanks unless they're almost entirely sure that there's nothing in the area that could hurt it.
That's a good point. And what we're talking about as well, this is all under the assumption this doesn't go nuclear.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, is entirely possible. I guess, you know, if Russia... I mean, that's the thing. How could Russia think they would be able to invade Europe without it becoming a nuclear war?
Well, that's the definition of a nuclear war, because you have tactical nuclear weapons, which against the modern strike force would be virtually useless unless it gets a direct hit, because most of the vehicles will be equipped with filtration systems and equipment to deal with the radiation.
Oh yeah, but we're not talking about the armies that are the problem. They'll just
we're talking about strategic stuff here.
They'll just grind to a halt. You know, the tanks will run out of fuel. You know, what will happen? I mean, it would just be the industrial capacity of Russia that gets wiped out. You know, and this is the thing, it's not going to be like the German army marching in, so they'll just dismantle the factories and move them deeper into Siberia. You know, there's not any time for that.
No, this is going to be a very fast initial movement. Like, NATO already has rapid reaction forces fully prepped. So this is not... At most, it's going to take a week to two before the European army... And this is assuming we are caught completely unawares. Like, the Russians are literally sitting in Estonia by the time the telephone rings of the EU headquarters.
Well, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I can't see it ever happening. And as much as we like talking military history and potential tactics and strategies, which I really do enjoy, I think we've made the point clear. Russia isn't a threat to Europe. Not now, anyway. You know, it might have been once, but it's certainly not now. And I can't see it being in the foreseeable future. I mean, do you think Russia's suddenly going to start? I mean, how, you know, they would have to build up their population before anything. They'd have to build up their technology. It's not going to happen.
Assuming that Putin's grand plan is invading the European Union for some reason.
No, he's not stupid. He would no.
Exactly.
He wants, I think, is diplomatic influence. That's what I think he wants.
Almost certainly. But assuming he wants to, his army needs major restructuring. Their tank force needs building up and modernizing, and their air force, it's hopeless currently, and their navy, even worse.
So
20 years, at least.
Yeah, but the thing is, and that then, you know, that would require everyone else on Earth to do nothing or get worse. So it's just like, yeah, I mean, you know, maybe in 100 years' time, you know, that things might be different, but now it's certainly not. So, you know, they can worry about that then, because like we were saying, the whole purpose of the EU seems to be obsolete. You know,
yes.
European powers within NATO are not going to go to war with each other, especially if, I mean, what would they be fighting over? You know, nobody's got an empire anymore. Nobody's contesting for land and resources. You know, now it's all done with businesses and corporations. It's, you know, if anything, what everyone on Earth wants is peace so they can trade. You know, then that's what the whole like TPP, TPIP are about. And so
that's the primary problem, because why, like, even Russia, Russia might want to fuck around with some of the countries like Ukraine, etc. Because
small proxy countries, basically.
Exactly, but what would they have to gain from invading Europe? It's the same within Europe. Like France invading Germany, why?
Yeah, I mean, like the Russians trade something like 8 billion euros a year or something with Germany. Yep. And it's something like, Christ, they're not just going to be like, oh, the Russian economy can just be like, yeah, don't worry about 8 billion.
Already the Russian economy is crumbling, and that's under the mildest of sanctions.
Yeah, exactly. Just an end to trade with Germany because you invade them. Yeah, that's totally going to work. No, it's ridiculous. And so, there is no like strategic purpose for the EU, as far as I'm concerned, that couldn't be equally fulfilled by just joint military operations.
Yeah, like NATO is great. NATO is a really good idea, and we need it because we want to be separate countries, but we need a powerful military because there are a couple other countries around that are not separate and they're fucking massive. But the European Union, it's outlived its purpose. Like maybe we could use an European Union, which I think we could, but it needs to be democratized.
Yeah, and that's not getting into the whole issue. I mean, there are so many other issues with it. People who've never lived in the country that they're making laws for, that bothers me. Yeah. I can't see that you're going to necessarily be making good laws. And the minimum estimate I can find is 50% of the laws being made in Brussels. The highest estimate is 70%. That's from like UKIP and Nigel Farage, but like the Guardian will report 50%. And it's just like, okay, but 1% is questionable. We don't need them making laws for us. We just don't. What possible reason would you need someone who has never lived in your country to make laws for a democratic country?
Exactly. Like overreaching laws, perhaps things like border controls, maybe, but like local laws should always be up to the member state.
Surely, I mean, it makes no sense, does it? I mean. Okay, maybe like trade regulations on products, but it's not the only thing they cover. And one, I found this interesting. Someone sent me this. So he. Oh no, it wasn't this. What was it? Oh, I must have closed it. Damn it. Oh, damn it. Did I close it or did I move it? Oh, damn, I closed it. Oh, never mind. I'll see if I can find it on Twitter, actually. But yeah, basically, one of the things about the open borders was the fact that a lot of criminal activity is crossing these borders, even though when they go back to their home countries, you can check and they have a criminal background. And they do apparently have border controls, and they are supposed to be screening for this. But apparently it's just not working. I mean, there are lots of reports of Polish gangs and stuff doing stuff. And it's just like, okay, they're just these are the bad people in Poland who are taking advantage of the fact they can obviously get through without their checks or whatever. And so something's going wrong there. I mean, don't get me wrong. At worst, it's an argument to strengthen these controls and whatnot. So that's fine. But it's still, is there any real need? Can we not just have our own border system? I mean, it's not like nobody's suggesting like that we don't ever allow anyone from Europe into the country. The immigration policy doesn't even necessarily have to change. I mean, I would like it to change, but it doesn't even necessarily have to change. I just don't want the European Union being in control of all this.
Yeah. Again, that's the problem with the European Union, which really should be disbanded at this point, or at the very least changed radically.
That will never happen, man. I was watching that Brexit movie, and they were saying how something like 77 votes that they've voted in, Britain's lost everyone. They've just because Britain wants to reform, but they don't want to reform. They're the ones trying to accrue the power. Of course, they're not going to vote to reform. They're the ones proposing a European army. Of course, they don't want to reform. It's just one of those things. Where it's like, oh fuck, man. These and this is something else I want to talk about now, is the state of mind of it all. Because, I mean, let's be honest, how many tyrants has America produced?
Not a whole lot.
Considering the power America has, that's impressive. How many tyrants has Britain produced?
Or a few, but it's been a while.
The last one was what, Charles I? Charles II?
I'd probably say, yeah, probably Charles II.
Yeah, So 17th century.
Yes, oh, it's been a while, like I said.
And that was the one tyrant that we choose, really. You know, that was that literally that was the guy who had been accruing power through the crown, obviously, to get to the point where God appoints him, and then he gets a revolution against him. It's like, okay, so how many tyrants has Canada, Australia, and New Zealand produced in the last, say, 100 years? You know, none. How many tyrants has Europe produced in the last 300 years?
Oh, we have made a few, haven't we?
And it's not even Norway I'm talking about. I'm talking about like continental Europe, not Scandinavia. You know, it's, the French and the Germans don't mind tyranny. It's something that happens a lot, man. You know, it really happens an alarming amount, and I think it's because they're generally quite collectivist.
Yeah, I would less so for the French, but like the Italians and the Germans have a long traditions of putting the collective before the individual, the discipline, the state, you know? It's quite common over there. And until relatively recently, it was a point of pride, you know, the Prussian military school, etc.
Absolutely, the Prussian military ethic was famous, and don't get me wrong, it was very effective. And you can't even blame them for doing it. This isn't a moral judgment, because you'd do the same if you were in their geographic location. You know, the fact that Britain is in such a safe location allows the development of individual rights. It's not, you know, if Britain was constantly under attack, we would be a collectivist country as well. You know, there is no doubt. You know, it's about pressure, but the thing is, I mean, you say the French less. The French are on their fourth republic at the moment.
True.
They have a revolution against the king and the aristocracy, and then end up with an emperor. I mean, these people don't understand democracy. You know, I'm sorry, it's just not like, it's not part of the national character. And then you've got things like the migrant crisis. It's like, holy shit, you know, Europe is having some severe internal social problems. And it's all self-inflicted.
Yeah, we've kind of pendled too far again, because the thing is, after the Second World War, Europe became very, very cautious of itself, because I think we finally started to realize that, damn, we're killing a lot of people.
Oh, no, some of the chat was just like, sorry, French on the Fifth Republic. So, sorry, France. I didn't realize how many republics you'd lost. I'm so sorry. Oh, fucking hell, sorry. It just pisses me off that we're supposed to be like, oh yeah, these people who have got a long history of tyranny aren't going to create another tyranny. No, you can't vote for them. No, of course. And they make most of your laws and they're going to get their own army. But there's not another tyranny on the horizon. Don't be silly. You're paranoid. Oh God, you're so paranoid, you right-winger. It's like, what? Isn't like the past
actually a good point to make, isn't it?
Future actions.
Yeah, it's actually a good point, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people that are very pro-EU and likes the idea, because I like the idea of the European Union. I like the idea, just not the execution. But then a lot of people might argue that what we're doing now is fear-mongering. You know, we're taking the extreme theoretical of a tyranny. But there is historical precedence.
Lots of them.
In fact, there's lots of it.
Almost all of Europe, in fact. But yeah, so I guess that there's just a part of me that genuinely worries about all this. And then, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to kind of say on that subject, just out of interest?
How so? About the whole tyranny part? Or?
Yeah, about the sort of continental trend towards dictatorships.
No, I think you summed it up pretty nicely when you said that this happens because there's been a lot of war. The simple fact is that war breeds a collectivist attitude, because you need that to stay alive. You need a powerful military. You need a disciplined military.
You need to be able to make sacrifices.
Exactly.
You know, it's unfortunately a fact of life when you're in Germany's position, where it can basically be invaded from anywhere. It's connected to Asia. You know, it's the first major state from Asia. For like the last 1,000 years, the Germans have been fighting off some awful people, you know? So it's just some terrifying people, you know? And it's like any nation in that's like the Assyrians, man. You look at the geographical location of Assyria, you think, fuck me, no wonder they were brutal. You know, they were getting invaded left, right, and center, you know? And then we're sat on this island where no one can invade. So the worst that can happen is a Scottish raiding band can come down. It's like, wow, we were lucky, man. There is a reason individual rights developed here, and not in, like, you know, Germany. It's not a character judgment. It's a pragmatic situation that causes it. And so, you know, I don't blame them. But if, you know, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live under that kind of regime.
And I think we have the social science, to use a bad word, to understand the differences now. We can have a government that allows us to have a peaceful and prosperous nation where the rights of the individual are put first, and a military where we can also uphold the principles that make a military good at its job, e.g. discipline. I mean, Britain has done this for a very, very long time now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, literally a very long time, and very consistently. One civil war in all of that time. It's like England as a polity has been around for over 1,000 years.
Like, it's the idea of having an army to protect the people rather than the state, which is the crucial difference here.
Yeah, and because England's been relatively small compared to its continental neighbours, it always has been that. The army has always been drawn heavily from the peasantry. The French would never have allowed their peasants to have longbows. Fucking never. Not a million years. Arming the peasantry? Are you fucking serious? But that's exactly what most of the English armies were. Armed peasants. Fucking, it obviously is going to breed a different character to the nation, isn't it?
It is.
But yeah, so let's see what the reactions have been. So you have the International Business Times talking about this. Now, I don't really know much about the International Business Times, but when I read articles from them, they don't seem to be explicitly biased for or against. I mean, they seem a bit conservative, so maybe they're against, but they seem to be reporting it reasonably objectively. But I suppose maybe not. Actually, I hadn't actually read this article. I got these articles up just before the thing to go through them because I was more concerned. I've read the Times, I'm more concerned about that. But so maybe it's not. But apparently, we've vetoed a similar plan to this in 2011. So this isn't even the first time they've tried to do this, and they're gonna wait until after the referendum to keep trying because that's what they do. They don't care. Like with Lisbon, they're just gonna keep trying because they have a plan and they're gonna achieve it.
Yeah, because they've already succeeded once with the military of the European Union, which is already an established branch.
Yeah. This is a new. Yeah, that's the thing. This is a new European military, operational structures including headquarters. Basically, they're expanding it. They want to massively.
Yeah. Because the current military is very small. It consists of essentially one division-sized formation that could be increased if necessary, and primarily naval forces, because those naval forces are more valuable to us than a military would be. Because, a unified control over naval forces is kind of necessary simply because they're going to have to cover a very fucking large area.
Yeah.
And they can't be used to oppress the peasants.
Of course.
It's very hard to oppress people with a ship.
But exactly. But not only that, the national governments would send their own people. They still have their own sovereignty, and so the idea of the EU saying, right, we're going to send some troops to quell this uprising here, they'd be like, are you fucking kidding? Because they're still sovereign entities. But when they're not, and eventually they won't be. It won't matter. So someone in the chat was like, remember, Sogan, that a lot of the English peasants were from the yeomanry, and I didn't mean serfs, I just meant non-aristocrats, okay? I was just being lazy, sorry, I was talking, but you're right, they were mostly yeomans. But yeah, so General Michael Rose, former SAS commander, said, sovereignty and defense are indivisible, and he is right. I mean, I had a chat with a libertarian guy who was suggesting that there could be, individual armies, privately funded armies within a geographic landmass like Britain or Germany or something. I was just like, that's the most crazy thing I've ever heard. I like the guy and I don't need to disparage him, but that is the most unworkable thing that you've ever imagined. I mean, you just have wars constantly. I just know it's not going to happen. But yeah, so he's absolutely right. That is what makes the sovereign, is that they are the ones with the monopoly on force in the territory. That's what makes them a sovereign. So, European law, in my view, has already seriously undermined UK's combat effectiveness as a result of the intrusion of European law into national law. And today, our servicemen and women are in danger of becoming no more than civilians in uniform. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that a British military commander would be against the idea. But he makes a very good point, and I think that's probably why he's against the idea. What's your opinion on
that? Well, it's an interesting position, isn't it? I think maybe it's a little overblown, but
Right. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I assume he would know. But if you know, if you've got some data or something, I'm, I mean, he's the former, so he's not currently in charge, so he might be a little outdated on his knowledge. But I mean, he's not wrong on the sovereignty and defense for indivisible, I suppose. But I don't know the effectiveness of our armies.
Yeah, I don't disagree with him on principle, but I think it's perhaps a little alarmist. No more than civilians in uniform. I'm pretty sure they won't stop training their army.
That's entirely possible. And you're right, he might be being a little hyperbolic there. But
I get what he's going at, though.
Yeah, but I mean, fundamentally, there's every chance that he might be right. But on the point of principle, he's absolutely on the money. This will be effectively transferring sovereignty. And I think this is the final stage of transferring national sovereignty to the EU.
Yeah, the simple fact is, if we're going to go... Because, again, we're going to go for the possibility here. If there is a European army, it is going to be large, it is going to be extremely well funded, and it's going to be the most high-tech army in Europe, without questions.
Oh, well, that's actually an interesting point, because, like, where do people think the money for this army is going to come from? It's going to come from the domestic militaries of the countries. And the rationale will be, well, this is why we're building the big army. You don't need to spend on the military now.
Exactly, which means that if a nation like Britain at some point decided we don't want to do this anymore...
What military have we got?
Exactly.
So, basically, this is a terrible idea, because this is ceding sovereignty of all of Europe to the European Union, to the European Commission, that you can't vote on. And it's just... And you can't even send someone there to change the laws. If there's a law you don't like, you can't even get them to do it via... I mean, you have to have a revolution. There's simply no other way to do it, is there?
You would. And also, it's just the principle of it. Because this is the thing. With the European army, you would still have to do this within the rules of the EU, which means vetoes, which means diplomatic processes, etc. Which is another reason not to do it, because this simply wouldn't function.
Yeah. Oh, hang on, my son's just woken up. I'll be back in a second. Would you like to talk about whatever you'd like?
Whatever I'd like. Well, I can try and expand upon that point then. Because currently, as most of you probably know, the European Union has a system of vetoes which allows some of the member countries to veto certain decisions, and this veto is final. So say, for example, if England puts down a veto against a military deployment against one of the member states, assuming that the European military has at this point been created. Then the European military, assuming it's going to be under direct command of the European Union, which seems likely, because otherwise, why would they not just have NATO? Because they wouldn't have any more control over it. Then there would be no deployment, which makes it almost entirely pointless as a military arm, seeing as, well, the United States could veto it, Britain could veto it, assuming they stay, France could veto it, Russia could veto it, etc. I mean, this is not very useful against anything but rebel factions, should I perhaps say. Let's say, for example, that Britain doesn't want to be on this particular boat anymore and wants to leave. Well, the first step will obviously be then to kick them out of the European Union, or hell, even just allow them to leave, and then swiftly invade the poor little bastards when they're still desperately trying to recruit in the 13 women that still are capable of wielding weapons in their nation, seeing as all the men have been shipped off to the European army, and at this point are probably somewhat trapped, shall we say.
Sorry, I don't know what you were saying there. I just got back there.
No, I was just talking about how this would not be a very useful military force against anything but member states.
Oh, why not?
Because the various member states have vetoes, which means that if any one of these member states vetoes the deployment of the military, they can't be sent to, for example, Russia. However, if a member state starts making waves, like, for example, like I said, Britain trying to leave the EU, the first step would be for the European to either A, kick them out, or wait until they leave, and then invade them. And then take away their veto.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And I think, importantly, it's important to remember what is at stake with Britain leaving. Because there is, I think, a good chance that this could cause, like, I mean, people are worried that this will cause a domino effect.
Yeah, and that's the the high question, I guess. If you stay, you could veto this proposal of the European army. If you leave, you cannot veto it. However, if you leave, you might be able to bring down the whole rotten structure, which is kind of needed at this point.
Yes, and I mean, that could in itself be a worthy goal. But that's the thing, though. Everything is at stake for the leaders of the EU, potentially. I mean, you would be a fool to rule out this if you worked in Brussels, you know?
Certainly, which is why they kept these plans secret, or tried to at least.
Absolutely, which is why some fucking hero went to the effort of fucking leaking them. And it's, I mean, when you are literally seeking, well, not seeking, but the consequences of your actions, even if taken for the greater good, you know, if you're directly attacking someone's base of power and their livelihood and everything about their careers, then they're going to work really, really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. I mean, they're going to probably end up getting quite desperate as well. So, and like I said, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow or anything, but they could end up taking I mean, it could like increase the amount of tyranny in Europe. You know, maybe it'd be the catalyst to form a very sort of a nationalistic regime.
I really think it's important to remember now that, like, because again, I'd like to think that a lot of people would think that this is fear-mongering, and to some extent, I would agree with it. However,
we are talking about worst-case scenarios.
Yes, obviously.
It's important to remember that we're not saying this is definitely going to happen or anything like that. But I think we're at the point where we can consider it a significant possibility that wouldn't be out of step with what would happen just generally when these sort of forces are pressing on societies.
Yeah. And the simple fact is, it's a hell of a lot simpler to prevent a tyranny before it's a tyranny.
Yes. In fact, it is eminently preferable. And, I mean, just the way the system is set up, giving the Commission power with the sort of culture it has and the sort of far reach it has, giving them the power of an army, a large army, that is paid by them and not necessarily going to be from the countries it might end up in, is just worrying. It's just a bad idea. The potential for abuse is there, so someone's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not some small potential abuse of power either. This is,
No.
I mean, literally, if this happened and they stationed units from different nations around Europe, we could look at a situation in which a military coup could happen within hours. Literally just various European army divisions would roll into various capitals and take over. It wouldn't even take that long.
And like we said, the various armies of the constituent states would just wither away and die.
Yeah, like, what could they possibly do at that point?
Yeah. You know, Europe is a disarmed continent. You know, nobody's got guns really in a significant way. You know, I mean, like Russia, yeah, there are probably lots of Russians with guns. You know, America, certainly. You know, but Europe, no. You know, we need to be careful about tyranny becoming the result of our institutions, because that's how we control everything. We don't have any other method, you know?
Yeah, because this is, again, the distinction. Currently, our armies are there for the people and the nation. This army would be there entirely for the state.
Yes. This is just so important as well. That's I mean, literally anyone with a cursory knowledge of Rome should be able to understand this, right? The reason that it required the Marian reforms before Roman armies marched on Rome is because before the Marian reforms, the soldiers had to have property. So they were citizens. They were property, full citizens. They had a representative in the Senate. They had an interest in the state and the success of the state because they owned land that they didn't want to see ravaged by war, you know? And they actually had a stake. The Marian reforms was when Marius decided, fuck property. What I'll do is enroll the dispossessed and landless. And don't get me wrong, there were lots of them. So it was a good idea for him tactically at the time. It was a good idea for Marius. And lo and behold, Marius then marches on Rome. Then Sulla marches on Rome. Then Caesar marches on Rome. And then that's the end of the Republic. And when it's all down to the interest of the soldiers, because you can't make soldiers do something that they're just not going to do. And I mean, it would be so hard to get a national army to overthrow its government without there being some serious problems there. And if it's not a serious problem to the nation to have the national government there, they're not going to do it. It just wouldn't happen. The generals wouldn't want to do it. The soldiers aren't going to do it. And so it's the disconnect that allows these things to happen. I mean, is there anything there that you think I've got wrong?
No, I really don't. It really is that simple. Now that the army serves the people and has a vested interest in the nation's well-being, it's going to require some truly batshit stuff to make them revolt against. Like, hell, look at Hitler. That is the perfect example, isn't it? Yeah. What did he do? He improved the life of the average people, and they worshipped him for it and followed him into hell.
Germans went to crazy wars for him. Wars that didn't really have to happen a lot of times. Yeah. But and the thing is, one of the things I'm also thinking of is Agathocles of Carthage, and he's an excellent example of. He was a Sicilian Greek, and he came from a town called Himeria, and he basically was a rogue, but he was obviously a natural leader. We don't really have that much information on him, but he was obviously a natural leader, and he was a complete fucking tyrant. And basically, he overthrew, I think it was the democratic regime in Syracuse, and then oppressed them all with an army of mercenaries. He had hired people from overseas and, from elsewhere, from Italy, to oppress the Syracusans. And he lived like that for 60 years or so, or like to the end of his life, basically. And he wasn't actually a bad ruler, but he was a complete tyrant, and he just killed everyone who opposed him. So, and what could anyone do? He controlled the army. So it was just like, we have plenty of examples of these things happening. And honestly, it's such a silly move. Even if it doesn't happen, it's the potential is there. Why would you set that up so the option is there? It's not necessary to do this. There's no threat pressing this in. This is a power grab by the European Commission.
Exactly, because there isn't a threat. That's the entire problem with the European Union. It was created specifically to prevent the threat of war by giving everyone a means of dialogue, a means of preventing nasty stuff in the form of vetoes, and of course to improve cooperation between nations. Yeah. But that time has passed. It has achieved its goals. The European Union has been successful. Now we need something else.
Okay, there are a few comments I think are worth discussing in the chat, because I understand where you're coming from, guys, but this isn't the same thing, right? So the first one is, don't spread fear. That's the other side. And it's like, look, I don't think this is spreading fear. I'm not giving you an unsubstantiated boogeyman. We're looking at this from like we're both people with a deep love of history, and we've read very extensively. And I mean, we're not experts on that. Do you have a degree in this, Arch?
Sorry, I dropped out there for a moment. Could you
That's
repeat
all right.
the last?
Do you have a degree in history, or are you just an enthusiastic amateur?
No, I just read a lot.
Yeah, same here. I read a lot as well, and so we're just big fans of this sort of thing, So yeah, okay, we're not experts on it, but these things aren't really that complicated. They sound complicated, but as soon as you understand, as soon as you know all these things, you think, shit, any idiot can see this is a bad idea. This isn't like something that is beyond the reach of most people, I think, and so it's not. I don't think this is fear mongering. This is, I think, a realistic threat that might happen. There is genuinely something bad coming with the EU. I've thought that for quite some time, and it's because I've read quite extensively about history.
Yeah, because again, I've already said this multiple times actually, but I can't see this as fear mongering simply because we are giving a scenario, and it is a likely scenario with the ramifications, I guess, that we currently have. We're talking about
the pressures and influences that we have at the moment. That's exactly the thing. All the things pushing things to occur are all pushing in this direction that isn't a good direction to go in. It's actually a really bad one, and we can see why we're heading in this direction. I mean, the migrant crisis is, Europe's on the verge of flipping to right wing. It's the political class are going to be completely alienated from the common man. because all they've done is victimize the common man. Because people forget that mass immigration is class warfare. That's what it is. It's bad for the working class. It's fucking awful. In fact, it's the best way to crush the working class, is to bring in millions of people to compete with the few jobs that exist. I mean, I always give Britain as an example, because I looked at the figures a few months ago, so I actually know what they are. But in Britain, we have 700,000 jobs free every month, on average. I mean, it goes up and down, sometimes 500,000. The Conservatives have got it up to 700,000. It was 500,000 before the Conservatives were the sole government. So, they have some uses, which is granted. But then at the same time, we've got 1.3 million unemployed. And, okay, let's assume that includes disabled. But that's still more that would still be more unemployed people than jobs available at any one time. And then if you bring in we still get in 300,000 immigrants a year. It's gone up under the Conservatives. The number of, and why wouldn't it? Why do they care if immigrants come in? They don't live anywhere near the Conservatives. The MPs and whatnot, they don't live anywhere near them, and they're not competing for the same fucking jobs. So it doesn't matter. What they're saying? Well, they compete for factory jobs and things like that. The thing that the average guy needs. And so he's feeling the effect. And obviously market forces means that depresses wages. You don't have to pay someone loads to get this particular job, because there are loads of people struggling to fill it. In fact, it puts the power entirely in the hands of the corporations, and it's probably one of the reasons we need a fucking minimum wage. So it's just a bad idea. I mean, again, if there's anything you object to with what I'm saying, do jump in. Because if I've made a mistake, I want to know. But I don't think I'm making a mistake here.
No, honestly, I'm of the same opinion. So...
and I didn't get you in just to agree. When we first started I was chatting to him on Skype. I was like, "Hey man, come and talk to me about the EU army." And I asked Arch, because I know that he's very, very well read on this. And it's not just being well read on history though; it's having a passion for the great game, the power politics of the whole thing. I think is important, And I'm well aware that Arch has an excellent, and he got good detailed knowledge of modern military forces, but. He said to me that he was in favor of it, and I said, let's do this. And then afterwards, I was just setting up, and then I thought, hang on, I assume he's against the idea. And I asked him, so no, I think it's a good idea. And I was like, oh, fucking hell, okay, we'll have an argument about it then. But and so yeah, I didn't just get Arch on just to agree with me, but I genuinely am worried about this. I mean, I think there's a genuine risk here, and I just think there's some wise. And again, if there's anything that you think I'm getting wrong, do let me know. I do want to know.
Yeah, because my idea of this is that, like I mentioned, I think that a European army is a very good idea. It would help out our communication system. It will help out it would save us so much money on technology if we could all just cooperate on developing new military hardware. It would help us train. It would help us be more effective. It would be a fantastic idea if it wasn't run by the European Union.
Well, yeah, but it couldn't be run by anyone else.
No, it would have to be NATO 0.0, essentially.
Yeah, and then, yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean, it couldn't be anyone but the EU, and it's them pushing for it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so someone also said no threats to Europe. What about the Middle East? And it's like, man, that's not a military threat to Europe.
What the hell are they going to do?
Yeah, no, they're going to bombard us with their poorest people that the cucks in our country will just take in. We can turn them away. We can just say no. I mean, most of these people as well aren't even from Syria. 19% of the refugees are from Syria. You know what? Fine, let the Syrian refugees in. They're fleeing war. I'm fine with that. The bleeding heart liberals can go, yay, we let the refugees in. And the people who are rational can say, okay, and we kept the economic migrants out, because why would you just let economic migrants into your fucking country? It doesn't help your country. But the thing is, of course it doesn't. If these people want to create a giant European superstate, they don't care about the average man. We know they don't. We know they've already got this attitude where they are just condescending to the average person. And so why would they care if loads of fucking immigrants are let in? This is why. And this is the thing. There's becoming a distinct disconnect from what the working classes want and the political elite want. And I get pissed off hearing from the fucking... the sort of middle-class virtue signalers who are just like, so you're a racist if you're against immigration. Mate, shut your fucking mouth. You're not poor. When you're a poor guy, you'll understand that that's a bad thing. That's why they are the ones fucking complaining. And you don't have to live with them. Again, you live in a nice fucking secluded cul-de-sac, in your fucking £300,000 house. They're not living near you. And And look at Rotherham, look at Luton, look at Sheffield, look at Birmingham. We know there are problems with the people coming in, and this isn't. And again, even if you look beyond the numbers and go, I don't care if poor people get even poorer. You can go, okay, well, look at the things these communities are doing. I don't want to blame the whole communities, but this hasn't been to our advantage, has it? This hasn't been wise. We could at least done some sort of, I don't know, checks on them or something. We could have had oversight. Why are we having Sharia courts? Why are there terrorist cells and people going to the Middle East from Britain to join ISIS? That is just insane. Are you honestly saying that being in Syria in a terrorist state is a better deal than living in Britain? I mean, we must be really doing something wrong if people think that. It's just mental, isn't it? That is just like, are you kidding me? You're going to get killed. You are going to become a sex slave. You're going to become a suicide bomber. Is that a great idea? No. Oh, well, where are they learning all this? Oh, what? Salafi mosques that are all over Britain, that are unregulated and no oversight at all. I wonder why they're going off to join ISIS. Oh, of course they're joining these mosques and being fucking indoctrinated. It's obvious. I mean, again, if you think I'm getting any of this wrong, let me know. But I've been really looking into this sort of, just like I cover a lot of this a lot of the time, and so you can start seeing where the problems are coming from and why they're coming. And this is why Europe is becoming incredibly nationalist, understandably so. This is why. Did you see the Captain America comic?
I did. It's funny.
Oh, it was brilliant. No wonder people are going, Hail Hydra. I mean, it was genuinely. I mean, the writing was superb. I thought the Red Skull's speech was really well done and very persuasive. Which is worrying. But he was right on the money. Every point of it was so detailed with the thing. I mean, so nuanced in what he was saying. He hit every nail on the head. And I'm thinking, man, are you actually the guy writing it? He's a progressive. He's I guess you would call him globalist. But he's an internationalist. He's fine. He doesn't want borders. He wants free moving people because you'd be a racist. If you didn't, he's an SJW basically. It's like he understands us. He understands the concerns. He just obviously doesn't care. Obviously doesn't think that he's going to be suffering from any ill effects, whatever effects they are. Fuck you, whatever. I don't know but like, how could you know so deeply the concerns of the people who are joining Hydra, the fascist organization you're painting in your thing, but using the real concerns of people and then not have any kind of empathy for those people? How could you do that? How could you?
This is the thing that I'm sure you've seen plenty of times too, and I've seen tons of times, especially over here in Norway, where we have a lot of very, very middle to upper class people. There's this idea that morality trumps logic, which means that we need to help these people because they live in shitty countries, which is because we live in good countries, we should give them our shit and help them. But they do not understand that you cannot simply take someone from Syria or Afghanistan or Libya, transport them to Norway or Britain or France or Germany, and expect them to fit in. This is a very complicated problem.
Yeah, I mean, in Norway, they literally had rape classes, anti-rape classes, sorry. And the guy was literally like, oh, I didn't know this was wrong. Why else is she wearing a low-cut top? And it's like, well, there we go. If you live in a country where they're covered head to toe in a fucking bin bag all day with nothing but their eyes on show, you could see how they would become culturally acclimated to thinking that only good women do that. And the women who don't do that are the women who want to be raped. Why else is she dressing like this if she doesn't want my attention? I don't think it's right. Obviously, I think it's abominable. But if you grew up in a culture where every single woman was completely covered because she wasn't enticing you deliberately, she was just being covered is the message saying you're not allowed. This is not invited. You go away. Being uncovered is, I presume, or would be if there were uncovered people. And prostitutes are probably uncovered. But it's a way of signaling. It's like, don't get me wrong, it's incredibly old-fashioned and draconian. And, it's, I don't like it at all, but I think that it's understandable.
Certainly. And that is why integration is important. And it's hard. Like, it's so oversimplified in the media. It's just like, we can just integrate them. No, this is a process that takes potentially years.
Generations, probably.
And qualified personnel. Yes. Lots of qualified personnel. We can't just snap our fingers and find these people. Like,
It
okay,
has,
the
it has to be
best.
heavily managed, I think.
Oh yeah, like we tried doing this in Norway where we had 30 immigrants per teacher, and we had a noticeable drop in their integration into Norwegian society. We dropped it to 15 per teacher, and the numbers went back up again. This requires a lot of personal touch, a lot of personal help, because you got to remember, a lot of these people, most of them in fact, are not bad people. They don't want to rape you
No.
because they want to rape you. They simply do not understand that we have a different set of values over here.
Yeah, and it's yeah, exactly. They they don't necessarily think they're being bad people. And the thing is, not only that though, and I'm sure that the people who have come, who are refugees, who are like majority don't cause any crimes and all that. I'm sure that they are like that. But a lot of the time, it's young men coming for opportunity. I mean, 75% were men, weren't they?
Yes, I think we're actually closing on 80% these days.
Jesus, I was going for the lower estimate, but yeah. And the thing is, I often hear like that you'll find the Guardian. They'll say, "Oh, well, 54% of the refugees are families." And so, yeah, but you're only talking about the refugees from Syria. You're talking about the 19% stat. So yeah, 50% of the 19% are families, but the rest of them are fucking men. They're young men adventuring, trying to earn money that's not by working in a factory or some shit job, or because there's nothing better in their countries. I mean, it's literally a story as old as time. Normally they would have come armed.
Yeah, and they've kind of been lured here by a fairy tale as well. There was a YouTube video actually that popped up on the internet last year, which essentially it talked about Norway, and this was in Russian language. This was when we had a disagreement with Mr. Putin, by the way. I'm not saying the two are linked, but coincidences happen and all that. That said that the Norwegian government had invited immigrants to Norway. When you come to Norway, you get a house, a car, guaranteed job, the whole shebang. And surprisingly enough, a lot of people came.
Yeah, someone in the chat said, "Oh my god, this sounds racist." It's like, no, it's not racist. There's nothing about race. I mean, this thing you got to understand. Like, people who don't grow up in like modern Western democracies are a lot more like people who existed in Europe before modern Western democracies. They're not bad people or anything like that. It's just there's a level of social development they clearly haven't achieved. And we can see this by their legal codes. They still stone people to death, for fuck's sake. Oh yeah, we used to do the same sort of thing in Europe. We used to hang people publicly. It was wonderful. The whole town would turn out for a public hanging, But these people still do that. This thing you've got to understand that there are civilizational differences of what we're talking about. Every race has had high and low civilizations. This is just that we're talking about the circumstances on the ground as they are now. There's no implication. There's no moral judgment. These are just facts. And like we said, these people all think of themselves as moral people, apart from the small percentage that are committing the crimes. But there is a larger percentage than that are also committing crimes that don't realize necessarily or even consider what they're doing to be criminal.
Yeah, I don't really see. I will never understand that. It's the idea that morality is somehow a natural human thing and not something that we're taught.
Yes, I mean, mate. The English people going to the Arab world is the perfect example of this, right? When I first learned about what they did in the Middle East, I was staggered. And you had, literally like, my mate would tell my mate he spent 2 years living in Saudi Arabia, and he was like, "Holy shit, man! You don't know about the police of vice and virtue?" And I was just like, "What? the what?" And he's like, "Yeah, the police would go around enforcing virtue on people, moral, religious morality on people." I was just like, "That's insane." He's like, "Yeah, that really exists." I was like, "That is incredible." And what if you drink alcohol, you get in trouble. Man, I don't think there's anything immoral about drinking alcohol. So I would go over there, crack open a beer, and be in trouble, and not even know that was wrong. Because why would I even ask? And they surely would have the same sort of impression. What are you talking about? I'm doing something wrong. Look at what she's doing. Look at this. Blah blah blah. I'm not saying they're savages. I'm just saying they have different values. And and surely anyone can see this.
Yeah, again, I think there's a lot of people that have this odd assumption that a human should just understand that things are wrong. Like, that isn't how humans work.
No, they're a product of their environment. Everywhere.
Exactly.
You know, and if they live in an environment that is oppressive, and I think that most of the countries generally quite are in general, you know, to a lot of people in them, and so it's but like, that's not to say the people. I mean, you know, the people can't be supporting this. I mean, most genital mutilation is done by women to other women, and you've got like countries like Somalia and fucking Sudan where 90+% of young girls are fucking have a clitorectomy, and it's just like holy shit. You know how these people think it's right to do that. They've got all sorts of justifications and rationales for it. There is a Facebook page that is in defense of female genital mutilation, run by some fucking Muslim council somewhere, I don't know. But it's just like, these people genuinely think this is a moral thing to do.
You can convince people that pretty much anything is a moral thing to do. That's the problem. Which is why integration is so hard, because you have someone that thinks that, yeah, it's perfectly fine to stone a woman if she sleeps around. Yeah. You have to kind of teach them that here in the West, we don't usually throw rocks at people until they die because they slept around.
Well, I mean, you know, what about apostates, though? How many gays do
exactly
buildings and hang? You know, the death. How many countries are the death penalty for being gay? Is it 10 countries?
I don't know the exact.
There are 22 Sharia law countries, but only 10 of them actually have the death. I can't remember if it's 7 or 10, but there are, you know, it's a good handful of these countries where they actually just execute people for being gay. I mean,
yep.
Isn't that terrifying? This is, you know, people have got to understand, you know, this isn't saying they're bad people. They're living within their own moral code very strictly in times, you know, literally with a police force to enforce it in some countries. But that doesn't mean these moral values are the same as ours. In fact, often they can be completely immoral to us. And yet, you know, for them, their moral code allows this. This is them doing the right thing. For us, it's the worst thing. And that's not racism. It's the ideas in their head. Anyone could hold these ideas. If you were raised in that country, you'd think the same, you know?
Exactly. Because, again, humans are not born moral creatures.
No, not at all. Morality is a social construct, which it absolutely is, actually. Now I say it, I was saying as a joke, but it is.
It is.
It absolutely is, yeah. But it just sounded funny because everything's a social construct. But yeah, so it's just one of those. It's just one of those things where there are so many problems coming our way, and we could prevent so many of them by simply just leaving the EU. I mean, this is actually a big chance to avoid many headaches down the road, you know, because I do think, I mean, and that's saying nothing of the economic stagnation of Europe. Why do we think that is? I mean, is it probably something to do with the ridiculous number of fucking regulations for almost everything around you? I mean, I'm no economist, but that seems like a likely explanation.
Yes, it's, well, partly that and partly because a lot of countries in the European Union have gotten used to a far higher standard of living than they can actually afford to.
Hello, Greece.
Hello, Greece, indeed.
We're talking to you, Greece. How's the Marxist government doing? A fucking bang-up job, I thought so. But yeah, so economically, I think, I mean, thank fuck we didn't take the euro, man. Thank fuck.
Yes, the euro. Oh, again, that was one of the few things I didn't actually think was a good idea, because the united currency is something we should do after we have a solid system in place, which we didn't really have at the point.
Yeah.
And it cost more to get it working than it's ever paid off, simply because, like, you already know some of the administration that goes into running the European Union. It costs an absolutely ludicrous amount of money every year.
Well, Britain pays 20 billion a year.
There you go.
20 billion a year to keep, you know, and don't get me wrong, some, you know, I think about half of it is reinvested in Britain, so there is a return on the money, but we're just paying out 10 billion. So we may as well just piss 10. We could leave the EU and just piss away 10 billion on parties or something. You know, every town in England or Britain gets a fucking party once a month. There we go. It's going to cost 10 billion. Right, okay.
It's the simple fact that when you make more bureaucracy, somebody's going to have to operate that bureaucracy, and they're going to want money for it.
I mean, alternatively, we could all pay less taxes, and that would be nice, wouldn't it? But, you know, they're hardly going to do that. But, yeah, it's just, I can't see what the Remain argument is. You know, I'll find this page. I was just looking at it thinking these are not arguments. Sorry, it was Scientists for EU, and I was just like, there were some really just like illogical ones.
Like I said, I like the idea, but that's the problem. The idea, not the reality. There's a difference.
Right, look at this. This is key. The Brexiters have now lost the economic argument. What's the argument? Oh, a survey. Okay, it's among economists, but why are the other economists saying no? You know, who's paying these people to do these surveys? You know, how are they worded? Is it being done by, an EU-funded think tank? And oh my God, unbelievably, they've come out and said, yes, it would be really bad for England, for Britain, if they left the European Union. It would just be terrible. It's like, yeah, well, you know, I kind of expected that from you, you know. And there was a thing the other day where they were literally like, you must be wrong because no scientists are saying it. And I'm like, oh man, that's a really great argument, isn't it? That's a brilliant argument. Oh, it must have been a few days ago.
There are a surprising amount of scientists that are creationists as well. So
yeah.
I guess we have to accept that God created everything now.
Yeah, and just like they can be biased. I mean, we look at social science. Look at the experience we've had with the regressive left in academia. I'm sorry, just saying scientists support it isn't enough, because you could be saying the same thing about Christy Winters, you know. And I don't think she's a reliable source. She's way too biased.
Exactly. And I think we began this talk about saying this could potentially be a really good idea in like 300 to 500 years. And I think a lot of people are going to go for that side of it. They're going to look at this and think like, this is a great idea if this and this and this and this and this and this happens over the course of God knows how long. But again, I don't think, like, I'm saying, I like the idea, but I don't think it justifies the current situation.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, I don't want to have to take the time to go through all these studies and then trace the financial connections. I mean, I watched Brexit the movie, and they were basically saying, look, they only take advice from scientists that they're paying. And I'm like, well, I'm not fucking surprised. And so, you know, I might be completely wrong. And they might be like, look, no, we are objective fucking scientists. We're not just doing social science. We're actually doing, you know, maybe economics or something. And, you know, here are the numbers. But you know what, right? I'll take the hit, man. I'll fucking take the hit. I don't even care. Say we end up becoming like, you know, second tier science thing. Maybe for the next like 10 years, we have a big economic downturn that we have to spend a lot of time working our way out of. I think that's a worthwhile sacrifice. You know, we can take the money that we would have been paying to the EU and pump it into science if you want. If that 20 billion a year extra goes to science. I used to work at the research councils in Swindon, right? They are the central hub of all the scientific research that happens in the United Kingdom. And they are desperate for money. They're desperate. I mean, 20 billion, the management, and I used to sit in them, I was just doing administration, but I still, you know, they're all in the same fucking room, basically. It's this big open plan corridor. And I'd have to talk to each of them just to know what they wanted on their website. So I became friendly with them all. And the management, they would love money. I mean, they were constantly suffering budget cuts. At the time when I left, they were suffering like from a major budget cut, and they were pissing themselves, which is probably one of the reasons they have to get rid of me. And they were struggling to find where they were going to cut stuff from. And it was coming off the number of days that they could run particle accelerators and rent out telescopes from like the Hawaiian Islands and stuff like that. The most clear remote places to get the deepest view into space. And they were really worried because the amount of beam time they could buy was shrinking. You know, normally they'd have their beams operating like, you know, for 192 days a year or something. They were cutting it down to 168 and stuff like that. Giving them 20 billion would probably just make them piss themselves with joy. You know, fuck me, this is perfect. I just don't see the argument for having a middleman to spend money with. You know, he's going to take a cut, and then the same thing will happen. It's just that it'll happen in Spain or in Italy, you know, or Geneva. I mean, you know, you'd still rent out. The UK would still be part of all of this. That's the thing. That's what drives me crazy. It's like, when the research councils aren't going to stop, they're a major funder of CERN, and I can't remember what percentage. I think it might have been a third, but I can't remember. It was a long time ago now. But my colleagues used to go to the Large Hadron Collider. I'm friends with I'm not going to say her name actually, but she's she was a good friend of mine while we were there, and her profile picture on Facebook is her standing next to what's the guy who found the Higgs boson?
Who haven't the faintest, honestly.
No, who conceptualized the Higgs boson? Sorry, deduced it. I keep wanting to say Tim Berners-Lee, but he invented the internet. He's such a nice guy, apparently. He's just this tubby old man, because he basically theorized the Higgs boson like 20 years ago or something. And then suddenly, boom, they've discovered it. And now he's a fucking superstar, And I don't think he's necessarily involved in the actual experiments themselves. But yeah, so what the hell's the guy's name? Peter Higgs, that's it. Peter Higgs, yes. Yeah, and it's so cute because she's like a fan of his, because she's well into science. And the idea that Britain will just stop funding that, they'd be like, "Are you kidding me? We need that money." Britain's a major funder of that. We're not going to start not funding them. If anything, we've got more money spare to give them, and it's just
and the economy question as well.
Someone in the chat's like, nobody spends someone else's money as efficiently as they spend their own. Absolutely. And that was a Milton Friedman quote. Again, I'm not an economist, but I'll trust Milton Friedman's judgment on it. I don't know. But that does sound... And Aristotle said... Was it Aristotle or Plato who said the same thing? That property held in common is valued by no one. And I agree. I genuinely think that's the case. You see it whenever you have anything like that. And it's just human nature. You value your own property and you take care of it. Whereas something valued... if it's someone else's property, I'm not really that bothered. There'd have to be someone quite important to you for you to be bothered. Sorry, Karen, I was interrupting you.
No, fine. Like the economy argument, there might be a downswing in British economy. Entirely possible.
Yes.
There might not be. But the thing is, it's not going to be catastrophic because of the European Union. Norway is not a member of the European Union. Our economy is roaring along, despite the fact that the people who are managing it are probably the biggest idiots that have ever been born on this planet.
And one of the things as well is the idea that, Germany and France. I watched Boris Johnson's speech on it, and I think he makes some fantastic points. And he's such a lovable buffoon, I'm worried that I'm biased. But, the argument's been made by several people that, look, Germany sells like 30% of British cars to Britain. Like German cars to Britain. They're 30% of our cars are German. There's no way they're going to cancel that trade. There's no way that's going to even change. Even if they were like, "Oh, we're going to have to renegotiate a deal," and yeah, okay, I know how it'll go. Should we carry on as we are? That's what it will be.
Pretty much.
Oh, look, here's a copy of the same trade agreement. Let's just sign it under a different sovereignty. It's a system that's working for both parties. The British want German cars. The Germans want money. They're obviously not going to fucking change that. They would be done. It's ridiculous. So again, the Remain camp seem to be positing situations that I just find absurd. I just can't see them ever really working out, and I feel like I'm being really biased because obviously just from a I don't want to say nationalist point of view, but I'm not even bothered about the concept of the sovereignty of it. It's more the effect it's going to have on me. I'm not going to be able to vote for the people who are making the laws I have to live under. I have a real problem with that, and I think everyone should have a real problem with that.
Yeah. Again, there will almost certainly be some negotiation, simply because this will be an opportunity for both sides to try and earn a little bit extra. But I don't think it's going to be catastrophic by any stretch of the imagination.
It's not going to be radically different at all. And yeah, no, I completely agree. So I'm just really struggling to see the other side, because it's just and I feel like I'm being heavily biased because of the idea that I am a citizen, not a subject. I think I should be able to vote on my government. Even if I don't want to use my vote, I want the option to be there. And so, just the alternative just seems to be going down a stupid path that we've seen repeated time after time in history. So, like with all things, I'm just baffled why. I keep hearing arguments to leave, and they're just bad. They're just I don't know. Anyone in the chat give any good arguments why we should remain? Sorry, not leave, remain, obviously. Because have you heard any good remain arguments?
All of the Remain arguments I have heard are based around the idea of the future, which is the problem, because I don't think it's a good enough argument.
No. So Brexit will make Okay, yeah, Alan Sugar, right? Okay. Sugar says Brexit will make Britain mugs of the world as he backs Remain. Okay, why? Other country's most respected businessman, is he? That's weird. He's not Richard Branson. fucking Alan Sugar. What? Fuck off. Free trade with Europe is vital to keep our economy strong and open, the billionaire says. Well, we will still trade with Europe.
Norway is not a part of the European Union, yet we still trade with Europe.
Yeah, but I mean, what does he know that we don't? I mean, how does he make his money? Business magnates. I mean, he probably knows a lot that we don't know. I mean, he's a billionaire, so he must have some. Amstrad, Tottenham Hotspur, Amsair, Amsprop, Vigeland Ltd. What do these things do? Education and public sector, right? So not international. Okay, maybe it's a lot of digital stuff. So I don't know. You know, he doesn't seem to be like trading goods, but again, maybe he knows something I don't know. But I mean, he's just saying they're mugs. You know, that like it's just this kind of vague language. Free trade to Europe is vital to keep our economy strong and open, the billionaire says. What do you mean? Do you think we're going to go into a protectionist economy or something?
See, this is the best counter-argument against this argument. If this was such a bad idea, he would have several points that he could point towards directly.
Okay, so he says, I want to cut through the nonsense and explain why we must remain in Europe and why we'd be the mugs of the world if we left. The young generation might see me as this fellow with a Rolls Royce, flying around in my private jet. They might think I'm out of touch with the average man on the street. Well, they're wrong. I am that average man who, at the age of 17, started my business from a council flat in Hackney. Oh, God, this is going to be a personal anecdote.
This is going to take a while.
Not a logical point. I brought some stuff, sold it for a profit, bought some more, went on to manufacturing things, mainly selling to my main market, Europe. The rest is history. What I did, anyone can do in this country. You're free to start from scratch, trade with the European counterparts. Yeah, but what's preventing us from trading with them anyway? And even then, what's preventing us from trading somewhere else? Someone that speaks English, as Daniel Hannan points out, would be actually a lot easier to begin trading with than, I mean, it would just be cheaper. You wouldn't have to hire a translator for a start, you know? And then you wouldn't have to translate your goods into different languages.
No, like, there are certain issues when it comes to selling things to other countries. This is true. Like, it is far more complicated if you do not have trade relations with the nations. But
we can make them.
Exactly. Norway is not a part
to do that at the moment. You know, that's the point.
Again, this is the thing. Norway is not a part of the European Union. We do not pay them our tribute, yet we have the same trade privileges as most other countries because we have a deal with them. Granted, we have an extra card in our hands that Britain does not at the moment, which is fuck tons of oil and natural gas. But
undoubtedly, they'll want to punish Britain just because they're going to be vindictive. Because like I said, we're attacking their power. They're going to hate us.
Yeah, they're probably going to do something to punish you.
You know, so they're going to want to punish us with something. But that's fine, because surely we can trade with the Anglosphere. There are so many huge English-speaking nations that think well of Britain. You know, they're well predisposed to Britain. And surely it'd be easy to, you know, to get trade agreements with them.
And the simple fact is you're not outright reliant on any European nation.
No, only 45% of our economy comes from Europe as a whole.
Exactly. What would have fucked you, and could potentially, if Norway had the other government now, the EU whores, you might have been in a worse position because they could maybe be punished into fucking over your deliveries of natural gas, on which way too many of you silly backward Brits rely on. But they're not. So even that point couldn't actually work. Like, could the European hold back from you? Trade deals for a limited amount of time. That is about it before the representatives of the other countries start going, we'd like to earn some fucking money again. Could we?
Exactly. And not only that, before competition steps in, market forces will apply here. Because other countries will be like, oh, Britain's up for trading a lot of stuff, and a lot of people can make a lot of money here. I want to be the person who facilitates that, so I make a lot of money. You know, there's a positive pressure for people in these other countries to encourage them to do this. everyone's going to make a lot of money that was being made in Europe, but they decided to cut their noses off to spite their face. You know, we were buying all these cars. Oh, we'll buy cars from Japan then. You know, it's just like, whatever. I don't care. But, you know, they're not the only place on earth we can fucking trade with. It's just like, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that he's not wrong on a lot of this, but it's just, I mean, again, he's just so brief with it. And it's just, okay, maybe he's just trying to explain to idiots, but I'm an idiot. And I don't think this is like viable.
Like, he brings up one point. Which is the fact here. Americans trying to sell cars to the EU have to pay 10% import duty. Yes, these are things that will happen. There will be clauses and there will be fees. But this is not going to be a massive issue. So cars in Britain, let's go by his numbers, will become 10% more expensive. Sucks, sure, but is it going to ruin your nation?
Yeah, I mean, my cousin has gone into property, and this is one of the reasons I just hate Marxism so much, because some of my family have gone from literally being single parent, you know, single mother child to, you know, he's got into property and he's ended up making a hell of a lot of money. And it's all through hard work and dedication. And there's a lot of risk to it. But he's done very well. And he bought himself a Jaguar the other day. It's £22,000. It's like, okay, so it'd be 25 roughly. You know, it's not that much of an increase. I mean, it is an increase, obviously, but he wanted the Jaguar, you know, he would have paid it. And that's the top end, you know, that's a fucking expensive car. You know, it's not like the end of the world.
Yes, and you Brits already have way too cheap stuff. I mean, oh my god, your car prices. We pay about 50% of the car's total cost purely in various taxes.
Really, that sucks.
Like that £22,000 Jaguar, you could double its cost, at least. Triple it, really? Probably. Like, it's not even funny.
That is crazy. I didn't know it was that expensive for cars over there.
Let's see, let's convert that to actually kroners real quick so I can give you a more accurate one. Not Swedish kroners, because Sweden sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 268,461 kroners. That, you couldn't buy a Fiat for that, a new Fiat. You couldn't.
See, and he's talking about, you know, look, he said, who knows what would happen if we left? Yeah, well, actually, I think we can be, you know, reasonably certain. I mean, you literally say, not a lot of people know that when Americans try to sell cars to the EU, they have to pay a 10% import duty. Well, okay, factoring that in, that's not that big a deal. It's not 50%. You know, the government doesn't have to increase the tax on cars to be like Norway. You know, and all of this, who knows what would happen if we left? Oh, imagine the sky falling or something. It's like, well, who knows what will happen if we stay? And if, you know, we can plot out the logical conclusion of currently what is happening in Europe and say, well, if we stay, it could be really bad, and we've lost our military and democracy. So, you know, I will pay a 10% import duty to preserve these things. I'm happy for that. I mean, I'd pay 15%. You know what I mean? I might even go 20% to retain some power over my government. You know, even if it's just the power of a vote, you know. And that's the only way the people are going to have any power, unless they're going to start getting violent. And I don't really want violent revolutions all over my country. I mean, I know I'm some sort of fucking bleeding heart liberal, but I'd just rather avoid doing that if we could, and I think we can. So, but this thing, I mean, that's literally seems to be his only thing. Well, we'll pay 10% more. That's the only number he's given in all of this. He's given us the anecdote of him, you know, selling to the EU. And I'm not saying that people didn't make money in the EU. Of course they did. They were trading, for fuck's sake. It was the point. But, like, you know, it's unimaginable for the exit and the tariffs are introduced on the car export. Why is that unimaginable? I mean, it'll happen. It happens to every nation.
Yes, it's like, again, if that is his best argument for why Britain is going to be completely and utterly economically fucked if they leave the EU, then I don't think it's much of an argument. Okay,
well, I mean, he says
there will
that,
be tariffs.
Yeah, he says that I'm sure our Japanese friends who have invested billions in our country and employ tens of thousands of people will have to rethink up their location. And okay, I agree, the Japanese might move their manufacturing elsewhere, you know. Like we said, the economy might well take a hit for like 10 years or something, you know. And okay, but it's not going to mean like Britain falls into rubble. You know, if the Japanese leave, there aren't that many fucking Japanese car plants over the country. It's not,
And here's
it's not
another
the
thing.
mainstay of the British economy, for fuck's sake.
This is a thing that's been happening quite recently over the last 5 to 10 years. A lot of those countries that used to be really cheap to produce stuff in, they're not so cheap anymore. In fact, they're starting to get really expensive. So this argument that that everyone will just move all of their production to China or Korea or whatever, maybe 10, 15 years ago, this would have been a real threat. But today, with the cost of transportation, the language problems, the logistical issues, etc., just imagine just the cost of tearing down a factory and rebuilding it in Korea,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, oh shit, I had a good point. Oh yeah, that was it. The EU, all of these regulations, they made a good point in Brexit the movie, right? I hadn't considered, because I'm not an economist, but I do think it's a good point. I think it's completely logical. Regulations favor big business. The idea having lots of regulations is fine for big business, because like if you're a multinational corporation, you can afford a team of people to ensure that your business runs within EU regulations. You can afford this and make a profit. You know, your business is profitable. You can afford to make sure you're within all the regulations. If you're a new business, an entrepreneur, then it's a lot more difficult, a lot more time and effort. You know, I mean, you probably can't afford when you're starting out to hire someone to go through your business and make sure it conforms to, and in some cases it is hundreds of regulations on, like, you know, things like, you know, bread. If you're going to manufacture bread, there's hundreds of regulations for it. 126, I think they said. And it was just like, okay, well, Jesus Christ, that's a lot of hassle. And then what happens if you break one of these regulations? Oh, you're fined. You know, you're a small business. You can't afford a fucking fine. You know, and it could be for an innocent mistake. It might not be something you did on purpose or anything like that. You just didn't know, or you just weren't careful enough, or something like that. And that could be the end of your business. And so, you know, and a multinational corporation can easily take, you know, so only a €10,000 fine. Okay, fine. You know, we'll pay it, or 100,000. You know, millions. They can still take it because these companies are worth billions. So it's very autocratic. It builds an autocratic system around itself, just because of the natural ebb and flow of the forces involved.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually.
You know, well, that's the thing. There were a lot of good points made in Brexit the movie, and I was thinking, like, you know, even if the Remain had some really good arguments about safety, it'd be still, all of this would still be unrefuted, because I mean, this is really happening. You know, these are the things that I don't see anyone actually contesting. The things we're saying, they always, like, you know, saber rattle about the Russians and stuff like, oh, what happened? Who knows? I mean, he literally says, who knows what will happen if we leave? Well, I mean, we can guess. Let's be pessimistic. Yeah, we have an economic depression. Okay, but we're still a democracy. We can get out of that depression by trading with other people, setting up new businesses. We can, I mean, that's one of the things that the Leave campaign won, is to basically cut these regulations down to minimum. You know, we don't need all these regulations. They're just getting in the way. They want entrepreneurs to start being able to work, and I totally agree. That's how you grow an economy, surely. People starting businesses and making lots of money. You know, how is that not a good thing? You know, why? There's plenty of innovation in this country, and I'm sure that a lot of it is probably being stifled by all of these regulations. Again, I'm not an economist. I might be completely wrong, but I don't see why I would be wrong on the face of it. I mean, there would have to be something quite significant that I don't know about, you know?
As a business owner myself, I will confirm that there's a lot of regulations when you need to sell anything to the EU. In fact, to the point where several people make a living entirely out of checking over your business proposals, etc., and making sure that they comply with these regulations.
Yeah,
they do not come cheaply, because you have to. You don't have a choice.
Exactly. You like, that's exactly the point. And so I'm so glad I got you on this stream, because you have extra direct knowledge of the things I'm talking about. But it's also nice to like know that I'm not necessarily talking complete shit, because I think I'm being as reasonable as possible when it comes to making a decision on this. But the Leave argument just seems so much stronger.
Honestly, the only argument could come up with that would have any real merit is twofold. One, the economy will be somewhat weakened, certainly. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's going to be apocalyptic. And as for the defense, I mean, unless you're planning on leaving NATO as well.
Yes, no. I've never heard an argument for leaving NATO, and I would be directly opposed to it. You know, the idea of leaving NATO is kind of crazy. NATO has actually functioned really well, if you think about it conceptually. You know, it hasn't interfered with any. You know, there's been no burden really on the countries themselves. You know, it's not something that affects people.
Because NATO is a national army for the people. It's made up by various people regiments. You know, it's not a state army again. These people are trained in their home country, and they're dispatched.
It's obviously an alliance. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, these people are they're not being paid by NATO.
It's a pretty massive difference. Again, if anyone's confused about the difference between the European army and the NATO, like a NATO force made up from forces from Britain, America, and Norway, Sweden, for example. These are these nations' military units. They are trained and paid by these nations, which is some of the problem with NATO, simply because it makes it a hell of a lot harder to communicate.
Disparate.
Yeah, and keep the common doctrines, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But they're these nations' armies. The European army is a suggestion where they would be European units. They would be drafted from various countries and then trained and operated by the European Union, which means that the European Union are the ones that decide how they train, what they train in, and what they're told.
Mm-hmm. And so, the very character of the people going to join is different. You know, their interests are different. This is the thing. You've always got to remember that people are going to act in their interests as much as they can. And it would be in the interests of soldiers paid by the EU to maintain the EU.
Surprisingly enough.
People would then, unbelievably, if you can fucking believe this, I can't believe I have to say it, but it seems to be one of those things that people are forgetting, that, you know, if they're being paid by the EU, they're going to do everything they can to promote the EU and to support the EU and prop it up if the war came along, you know, if a revolution came. They would fight for the regime. They are the regime's forces.
Yeah, and it's the simple fact that it's an army. Like, this is an argument I hear around World War II a lot too. Like, why didn't the German soldiers just say stop? Like, they've been trained for years. They're disciplined. They're soldiers, okay? The literal point of military training is to beat it into that thick skull of yours that you obey your superiors.
Yes.
That's not something you just rebel against.
And not only that, you're very rarely given any information that you don't need. I mean, they have need-to-know basis for a reason. You know, you don't tell the common soldiery things that might put them off.
Like on the daily briefings. Oh, and by the way, we're gassing Jews 50 miles to the rear.
Yeah. And then you know, we're invading Russia. Why? Because Hitler's paranoid. Because it's a Jewish state. The Marxists, you know. That's why. Oh, that's a good idea. No, you tell them bullshit. You know.
Yeah, like, we're invading Russia because they invaded us, and now we're just defending ourselves. Oh, what's that? Massive troop movements on the border before we invaded them, you say? Purely coincidence. Same with Poland, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they don't know. Why would they know? And so, and look at like the American army in Iraq, right? It took a long time for American veterans to begin dissenting from that, you know? It was a long time into the occupation of Iraq before you'd see, like, you know, the viral videos of American Marine goes out and drops his medals and say, no, this was terrible. You know, that could have happened very early on, but it didn't. You know, and it's that sort of military, and I don't want to say indoctrination because it sounds sinister when you say indoctrination, but it is a form of indoctrination. And I come from a military family. So, you know, I've had friends who have gone through the military. I mean, like a friend of mine joined the army, and they have an intense training regime where they're kept to themselves, obviously. So to bond, and you know, they beast each other. So people who are stepping out of line, the others beast them. They beat them up basically, to make sure that they stay in line. It is entirely collectivist because an army has to be, and it is an indoctrination process. And if you're indoctrinating these people to be worshipful of the EU and the people who answer directly to the EU and not the nation states, I can't see how you wouldn't have people who just didn't care about the nations, you know, the provinces of the empire. You know, why would they? And it would just be Rome all over again.
Yeah, because you also got to remember, this system is the perfect system for an army. A collectivist state with a very clear chain of command, and very heavily based upon hierarchy and discipline.
Yeah, someone's like, Sargon, the beatings are very infrequent. It's the threat of beatings, you dummy. It's the reason they're infrequent is because people are like, oh god, everyone will kick my ass if I do that. Fucking obviously, you know.
Beatings are very infrequent. I like that.
It's like, sorry, yeah, no, not very many people. You know, it wasn't every day we were executing someone in the communist regime. No, it wasn't.
It's essentially an IQ check. If 9 burly men are standing around you, threatening to kick your ass, it's very infrequent that the dude in the middle goes, "Fuck all of you."
Exactly. You know, just gets his ass kicked. But and yeah, self-preservation makes them rare. But yeah, so carrying on with Alan Sugar's argument, which I'm just like, so he's like, right now, you know, so you might ask, why leave? The song "There's a Hole in My Bucket" comes to mind here. Now, I'm not saying the EU is perfect good, but you don't start something out by walking out of it. I never got a business deal I wanted by storming out of the boardroom and then expecting to dance my tune. Yeah, but this isn't a business deal. That's the problem. This is not a business deal. We are talking about the sovereignty of nations here. You know, we are talking about your rights. You know,
an entirely different system.
And you know, I'm sure that a billionaire doesn't need to worry too much about his rights because nobody's going to be going on about billionaires. You know, nobody's trying to oppress a billionaire. You know, a billionaire can afford to move if someone tries to do that. Oh, we're gonna create a law that's terrible for you. Oh, well, really, I'm going to go somewhere where there isn't that law, and it's going to be very easy for me because I own a jet.
Yeah. The comparison is just ridiculously flawed to begin with. I'm sure he's just making a vague point here, but if if his business partners had a veto right to anything he wanted to push through, I'd like to see him talk them out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, every vote that Britain has participated in, it's lost. Like 78 of them or something they were saying. And this was coming from, you know, the members of the European Parliament who are in those votes. You know, the guys who are saying, look, we can't create laws. All we can do is vote on what the European Commission gives us the option to. We almost always vote no, and we're always losing it. You know, because the zeitgeist in there is that everyone's like, yeah, this is a great idea. That's why they're doing it. You know? If
because it's a bad idea, this wouldn't be happening.
Exactly, because most of them are not British and they agree with the ideas that they're putting forward because they are the primary beneficiaries of it. These are the people who get their money this way. Of course they want more power. Of course they want more money. Of course they want more control. Every power structure does. It's just natural. And so Alan Sugar going, yeah, but, you know, business deals, shut up. You know, and then he's like, we need to be there, making Britain's voice heard. Does anyone seriously think they'd listen to us if they left? They don't listen to us now. You know, that's what all of the MEPs are saying. They're all like, no, they're just. I mean, Nigel Farage, right? You see him get up, and then he will lambaste them on some failure of democracy or economics, both of which he does understand. I mean, he worked in the city for God knows how many years, and so you know, I think he has a firm grasp of the economic situation. Every time I've heard him speak about it, I've never heard anyone object to what he said. You know, they're always just like, "Oh, you're a racist." It's like, okay, but even a racist might know something about economics. You know, and so it's just like, you know, they're all saying that we're not getting anything done. You know, we're not reforming the EU from the inside. In fact, if anything, it's going completely the other way. And every fucking piece of evidence we have seems to make it look like it's going the other way. So why shouldn't we believe that it's going the other way and that we're not getting any reforms? It's not going to happen. So what is the point of staying in?
Exactly. I actually like his next point too, comparing them to Canada, and Norway, and Albania, which is an interesting combination of nations.
Jesus Christ, yeah. What's the common connection between Canada, Norway, and Albania?
Canada can't easily sell things like financial services to the EU. Yes, but Canada is also on the other side of a small pond, so that's a minor issue there. And Norway pays as much in the EU per head as we do. Yes, this is true, because our previous government were a bunch of fucking ass-breathing morons, and they need to be shot. Additionally, the average income in Norway is quite a bit higher, so yeah, it's kind of naturally that we'd pay more, even though we shouldn't. And Albania, yes, let's talk about Albania. How big is that country? A wheat field?
Oh, God, yeah, Albania's, I mean, it's impoverished. And the thing with Norway, you're paying for privileges, but you're not paying for them to rule over you. They don't make your laws. You know, I don't even mind if we still have to pay the money to get trade deals and beneficial, if we had the Norwegian deal, say, right, okay, we've got to pay the same amount per head, I would be okay with that. I'd be like, okay, well, fine. As long as it's that, there's a reason for it, we're getting a favorable trade deal, blah, blah, blah. I just don't want them making our laws, and I don't want them commanding troops, or at least our troops, I just,
yeah. And as for we don't have any say in EU, that's true, but neither does Britain, apparently. So
no.
Your argument, sir?
Yeah, it really doesn't appear that we have. I mean, I can't see what we do, and so.
And again, don't get me wrong. The Norwegian deal is. I don't even. The people who made that were smoking way too much mushrooms at the time, so just
Yeah, I mean, he says, you've got leading economists, big-time business bosses, scientists, politicians, people who are normally at each other's throats, singing from the same hymn sheet. Is it, yeah, okay, that just makes me think they're all getting the same money.
Yeah, and also, you've got, let's see, the ruling elite, essentially, politicians, business bosses, big-time business bosses, economists, and people. These are not the average Joe, I think I'd be right in saying.
Of course, and these are people who stand to lose a lot. But
yep,
this is the thing. This is why I think that, maybe we should take what they're saying with a bit of a grain of salt. They're all singing from the same hymn sheet. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. The reason that I have so many conservative, I don't know. I guess I mean, a lot of them are friends, but even the ones who necessarily aren't friends, I would still call allies. In the sort of culture war that we're fighting, because fundamentally, I mean, we don't necessarily agree on the issues, but at least we agree on the battlefield to fight on. We're like, okay, yeah, no, over there's good. But the identity politics guys, they want a different battlefield altogether that we're not good at fighting on. Both sides are quite good at fighting on the standard one. They want to change the rules of the game entirely. And that's why we're finding ourselves in common cause. The very things we are all happy to agree on, these people are undermining. And so I think that this is the same thing with the EU.
Yeah, I can see that.
But again, I'm talking in general terms, and I'm being vague, but I don't think that that's necessarily inaccurate, in general terms. And he says, for me, I come at this from a neutral perspective. Dude, you just said you made your fortune out of Europe.
Exactly. You got rich off the European Union. How are you neutral?
Out of Europe. Don't tell me you're fucking neutral, mate.
And again, he has nothing to lose. Okay, let's say that Britain just collapses instantly. Okay, move to Brussels. Let's say the opposite is true, and the European army decides to take over at some point. Okay, again, move to fucking Brussels. You have a jet.
Move to America. He can go anywhere. Even if he doesn't want to stay in Europe, he could go anywhere in the Anglosphere, probably anywhere in the world, because he's a billionaire, and every country's probably happy to have billionaires in it. I mean, can you imagine being a billionaire and going to Venezuela and being like, okay, well, you would obviously meet the president, and he would say, oh, yes, very, very favorable. Just spend a lot of money in my country. And it's like, well, that's okay. I'm a billionaire, and you are piss poor. So I will actually not be spending very much money, but you will think I'm spending very much money.
You don't even have to go that far. Already, if you go very close to Europe, if you just you don't even go that far. If you just head down to Serbia, you can buy a house, a massive house, for half the cost of anything in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. People keep misunderstanding this economy argument. It's all or nothing. Economies fluctuate. It goes up, it goes down. This happens naturally. Leaving the EU is not going to suddenly throw you back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this. People tried to dismiss these warnings as Project Fear. I'll tell you what, this fear isn't imagined. It's real.
And give us an example instead of cars will be 10% more expensive. Oh, God, no.
Yeah, quick. Abandon democracy. Abandon democracy. I mean, he's looking at this completely from the perspective of a businessman. I love this. I'm not affiliated to a political party. I've got no personal agenda. Well, you do. You were talking about how cars are going to be slightly more expensive. That doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm not buying so many cars that is an issue for me. My ability to vote on the laws I'll be living under, that's a big issue for me. And I imagine for the average working man, the open borders policy is a big issue for them. It's no fucking surprise that they're against it. And I totally sympathise with that point of view. There's no reason that any country should just have open borders. It's ridiculous. Just and the thing is as well, right? We've got a welfare state. Holy shit! Open borders and a welfare state. That is a brilliant idea, isn't it? Just unsustainable.
I'm sure the people from non-welfare states are going to stay right where they are.
Exactly. We already get plenty of health tourism, and it's just, this isn't a general election. We can't say in 5 years, oh, it didn't work, we'll have another vote. It's the most serious vote you'll probably make in your lifetime. And it's like, yeah, it is. And that's why I'm taking this so seriously. And that's why I'm considering what the worst case scenario could be and how likely that is. And it's surprisingly likely, and it's really bad. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen or something, but there is the potential there, and it's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. It's, I wouldn't want to dare put a percentage on it, but and this is the thing I was going to touch on earlier as well. The whole the general public becoming right wing and the intelligentsia becoming left wing. Now this is a real problem, because I don't know whether everyone's noticed, but the right wing and the left wing fucking hate each other. They literally cannot stand each other. I mean, being right wing is the excuse, the reason, the argument against talking to a person if they are right wing. This is why Kevin Logan will not shut up by going, "I'll just admit you're right wing." I'm not. I'm in favor of social welfare. I'm perfectly happy being left wing. It's just you are fucking crazy. But that's the thing. They need to be able to label you right wing so they can just dismiss you, because they hate the right. They just don't care. They're honestly, it is getting to sort of levels of dehumanization, right? I was watching, and I'm going to do a video on this, because this was I made a video a while ago about the assassination of Donald Trump, and America is more polarized than anywhere else. It's than in the West. You can see it. It's even Germans are not as against Angela Merkel as as Republicans are against Hillary Clinton. Like the working class Germans against Angela Merkel, and she's massively unpopular. And so you've got literally you've got like Never Trump and Hillary for prison and all this. And so I was watching these Bernie supporters being interviewed by, he was a Republican, but he was pretending to be one. So I'm going to, and they were all just casually saying, "Oh, we think he'll be assassinated." And I've made this argument. I think there's a good chance at least someone's going to try. And after that kid jumped the fence and rushed him on the stage, I thought that was going to be it. He was, "Oh, no, I just want to take the microphone off him." It's like, really? He's surrounded by security guards, and he's not a small guy anyway. You thought you were going to just rush up there, rough him up, and take the mic. What sort of fucking idiot are you?
I would never have dared do that. You're jumping up on the stage on a presidential candidate in America. The fact that man did not get ventilated is still surprising to me.
He was surrounded by Secret Service agents. I mean, for fuck's sake, are you insane? But that's the point. This dude is fucking insane. He believed, man. He was like, yeah. I mean, he was an SJW, and it's like, and so I was watching this.
Doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was watching this thing where they were literally saying like, "Oh, we think he'll be assassinated because so many people hate him." They were just casually, "Yeah, we think it'll happen." "Oh yeah, I don't mind. I hate Donald Trump," and it's just like that's the point, isn't it? They just don't care because of his political position, and so if eventually, and man, you can tell. Kraut & T has done a guest video for me because I'm going away tomorrow for a week, and I've got a few guest videos. Kraut & T's done a guest video, and there are plenty of examples of the politicians talking to the people, and giving them the old fear of Nazis. "Oh, do you remember the Nazis? This is all your fault." And then there was another video, sort of, it was a mayor or something, or no, it was a local, they don't call them MPs, but a local politician or a politician of an area, and he was literally berating this crowd. There must have been about 1,000 people there watching it in this town. Is berating them, and they were just chanting back at him, "We're the people, we're the people," And like with, what was it, Austria or Hungary that nearly had the far right party in power?
Yes, actually, several European nations now have the far-right parties in their parliaments.
Yeah, but not in power yet. But the worse it gets, it's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen, right? And so giving the EU an army, an extremely leftist thing. I mean, in Portugal, they were going to bring in a law to ban far-right parties from being political parties. I'm going to do a video on it because I've got a bunch of things where I'm going to call it like leftist fascism or something. Because I was just looking and saying, you're going to ban a political position from even being able to run. I mean, that's totalitarianism. That's naked totalitarianism.
The simple fact is, if you go too far right or too far left, you end up in the exact same spot.
Exactly. And this is why people are like saying Hail Hydra, and there's a guy in the chat, the far right are the good guys. And, you know, they kind of are becoming the good guys. They're the ones who are actually advocating for the interests of the people. And it's just like, you know, it's the fact that the intelligentsia they're not being responsive to the needs of these people that are driving them into the hands of these people, and they still are democracies. You know, the EU isn't actually a tyrannical organization yet, and so they're going to do that. So the national governments will become heavily right-wing and heavily nationalistic, and you have a very left-wing, very idealistic and ideologically driven European elite who then get their own army and can buy their own army. It's going to be wars. There are going to be revolutions.
There is, because you'll have the people against the establishment.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be. And I wouldn't blame them at all. And it could all be avoided by simply not giving the EU its own army.
Or at the very least, it'll make the rebellion a hell of a lot easier.
Well, yeah, I suppose. But yeah, and so Alan Sugar's like, oh, you might have to pay 10% more on cars. Sorry, Alan. Sorry, that's not that big a deal. You know, I would rather avoid, and like I said, if Britain leaves, there's every chance that other slightly more Eurosceptic nations will start leaving, especially in the wake of the migrant crisis. I mean, you literally, I left this out of This Week in Stupid this week because I didn't have time. I'd already gone 30 minutes on it. But the new Prime Minister of Slovakia has literally said, we will accept no refugees. Islam is incompatible with Slovakian values. We're accepting none of them. And it's just like, balls out to you. Poland's already done this. All of Eastern Europe has built fences along its fucking borders to prevent them fucking flooding into their countries. They're not having any of it. I imagine they're becoming a lot more Eurosceptic. When you see Merkel going, oh, let them all in, and everyone's like, refugees, welcome. And it's like, fucking, you're mad. You know, and it's the German self-hatred that's fucking enabled that. And the goddamn ponciness of the European political class. Oh, we have a dream. Oh, shut up about your fucking dream. Shut up. Just not interested in your fucking dream of a European success. I know I'm ranting on and not giving you time to talk and stuff, but I've been watching all this coming together and just like, oh, man. I mean, what are your thoughts on all that? So again, I was going off quite a lot, but I know I'm talking about things that are really happening. You know, I'm not. I deal with this all the time. This is actually my job now, so I'm kind of pleased I can give an analysis that I do feel is very informed. You know.
See, the problem now is you're talking about what I would consider a bit of my side of the view, the little bit right wing, where I just go like, yeah, just close the borders because these people are crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad the migrants in Calais have had to stay in Calais. Again, this week, I was going to put in This Week in Stupid, but I didn't have time. There was a battle in the migrant camp in Calais this week where 200 of them, Afghans and Moroccans, decided to have a miniature battle. And someone got shot, a bunch of people got stabbed, the whole place got burned down. Well, not the whole place, but there was a large fire. And they've got this wide-angle fucking picture. And it must have been like, I don't know, a few hundred meters square that was burned down. And it was just like, fucking, why? Just, these people aren't Syrian refugees either, so fuck off, which is the reason they're not here. But it's just, these are just, we're creating so many fucking rods for our own backs over and over, and we could just avoid it all by simply just leaving the EU. You know, it would, okay, oh no, cars might cost a little bit more. Man, deal, man. And I'll have a look at something else. I was on Twitter then, wasn't I? So that's the top thing on Twitter. And it's xenophobic not to allow criminals into the UK to sexually assault women. Heard it all now. Another xenophobic statement. Yeah, so, oh yeah, I bet she's talking about migrants. Yeah, okay. What's? I mean, Man, the Labour Party pisses me off. The idea that the Labour Party is pro-immigration, just that's an insanity of itself. But okay,
Well, you probably got the same problem we've got over here. We also have a Labour Party, except they stopped being a Labour Party about 30 years ago.
Yeah, with that. What? Oh, what? All their links are broken. Okay. What? What? Do you have anything on? Oh, did you just run out of ideas? Oh, okay. All right. I guess they just shut the. Someone was like, delete your site, and they did. Okay. Well, I'll look somewhere else then. Yeah, and the case is about half and half generally in most polls. Apart from this one, what? Where was this poll done? Remain a small minority on all polls, apart from government-affiliated pollsters. Well, that's a nice statement, but I'd like to know where this information comes from. I mean, this is why I haven't done anything like this with my audience. My audience will probably all leave. There's probably 5 stay, so there'd be no point in me doing a poll on this sort of thing because I just get loads of people going, "Yes, fucking leave." But
Wait. Annalisa Dodds is voting Remain to protect the environment for her children.
Oh, right. Now we're protecting the environment by remaining in the EU.
How is that going to work?
I have no idea.
Oh, look. A history of Europe. A history of Europe, pre-EU, war, post-EU, arguments about bananas. Yes, it's because we just got finished with the second fucking World War. We're kind of tired.
Yeah.
Give us a while to recover, fucker.
But no, I love the idea that they don't think, the Second World War was, something that may have affected that. I mean, okay, wars between America and Russia, were there any? No. Oh, was the EU involved? No. It was the unbelievable bloodbath of World War II combined with nuclear weaponry the contributing factor to no wars, in fact, major wars, between major powers since World War II.
Yeah, maybe the change from swords and shields to automatic weapons might have had an effect.
Yeah, exactly. No, seriously. I mean, the horrors of World War II, I really think were the reason we haven't had another war in Europe. I really do. And again, now we're all in NATO, so fuck you. It's not going to happen.
This is the caliber of fucking arguments.
These are ridiculous arguments from people who have no idea about fucking just history and power politics. That's the thing. What we're talking about is power politics, and they don't know anything about it. And it's weird because very few people do know about it. It's quite a specialist subject. I should probably see if I can get Robert Greene on, because he's so marvelous. I've read you've read the 48 Laws of Power and the 33 Strategies of War, right?
The last one I have read, the first one not.
Oh, the 48 Laws of Power are amazing. They're amazing. And like with everything, like with Machiavelli, he backs up everything he's saying with a historical precedent. He shows you, often with multiple examples of things. And like I said, I was reading it, and I loved the fact that he was bang on the money with all of his historical examples. I can't think of one, and I knew most of them. I knew the story behind most of what he was saying, and I knew what happened, and he was right. And it's like, okay, well, I read a lot of this sort of stuff, and because I enjoy it, and it's just silly. And then there are these idealistic people going, "Yeah, vote Remain." What, David Cameron? You're meant to be a Eurosceptic, and you're like, vote Remain. It's like you said, they're going to retire in the European Union. They're going to do a Tony Blair. They're going to start taking money from all of these things. It's like, okay, let's see what David Cameron and Sadiq Khan have to say, because I'm genuinely curious. Okay, Remain rally, yes, but what did they say? Britain strong in Europe, battle bus and pledge card, but vote leaders have okay. But what was the arguments? What were the arguments? Cameron describes himself as Eurosceptic. Yeah, sure. But
Cameron describes himself as many things.
Okay, I'm just going to Google Remain pledge card, because I want a list of the things. I don't care about the drama between him and Sadiq Khan.
But Google does.
Yeah, Google's very interested in it. Actually, Google News. What is it? I've never used Google News. Okay. what is the reason to stay? Right, well, okay, so we've got a single paragraph, 5-point guarantee card listing. Right, so the card promises full access to the EU single market. Yeah, brilliant. Protection of workers' rights. Yeah, that's important, isn't it? Because that's what we're going to do. We're going to like back to the factories, back to the cotton mills. Get down the fucking mines. You got 12-year-old, get them down the mine. We're going to abandon the idea of workers' rights. Fucking idiots. Just idiots. A safer Britain, quote unquote. Yeah, that's, I actually don't think it's a safer Britain if we succumb to foreign tyranny. I mean, what possible reason have you got for that? Cooperation with other EU states. Do you think, Norway would never cooperate with another EU state, would it?
Well, we try to keep our distance from the Swedes, but that's for entirely different reasons.
But that's the point, isn't it? These things are things that will all outside the euro, yeah, great. And the Schengen passport-free area, yeah, great. For now, until they make a new legislation that we can't repeal.
Yeah, Norway's part of the Schengen agreement, so even that, you can still leave the EU and still be part of Schengen. That's not actually a problem.
I don't want to be part of Schengen. It's about to collapse anyway, isn't it, with the migrants? So
yes, but we just need to close the borders and say that brown people can't travel, but white people can. Simple.
God, you are a secret fascist at heart, aren't you?
Aren't I just?
Yeah. But yeah, the opt out of I love the opt out from the EU's aim of ever closer union and stability. See, they are literally saying they want to create a European superstate. What more do we need? Why are there any? This is David Cameron's argument. This isn't some. I've seen better arguments from plebs on a message board. This is David Cameron's argument, and it's.
Perhaps he's secretly a Eurosceptic. He's paid to present arguments by the EU, but he doesn't want to, so he makes them shit.
Yeah. And so, if these... does anyone in the chat know what we should look for? If we're looking for a good Remain argument? Because I genuinely want to see a good one. One that I can't just be like, that's absurd.
Beyond shit will get 10% more expensive, for example.
Worried about our NHS, but what about migration? Yeah, exactly. Look, literally, every fucking one understands that more people who aren't paying taxes, they've literally just got here, they still might be sick and get sick, and then they're gonna be putting, and it's not just it's not pressure on the NHS as well. Don't get me wrong, that's a major factor, but it's the welfare state, it's the infrastructure, the trains. Man, I don't have a car. My missus has a car because I'm too lazy to drive. And basically, she's my chauffeur. But I use the trains a lot. And man, the trains are always packed. I've never looked at it and gone for a racial profile or anything, but it's just the sheer number of people on the trains because our infrastructure was built in the 70s. We had 15 million less people when these things were built. And now, the London sewer system, it's fucking full of fat. Because London wasn't as big, and it's just I just don't understand why they're not talking about these things. Well, I suppose they're not talking about these things because they know it'd be a bad thing for their argument. But why isn't the Remain camp talking about these things? They're always talking on financial terms, and I'm like, I'm not that worried about money. I think a lot of people would be a lot more aware of just explain the democratic process, which is why that Brexit film was so good, I suppose. But explain that none of what they're saying is ever going to come to pass. We'll reform the EU. We have a voice, and they ignore it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's also one argument I've heard, which is granted from over here, so I don't know if you British are quite this stupid, but assuming they are.
Probably.
We've had an argument over here that says that the immigrants are actually an economic force for good. All we have to do is to get them to work, and we will increase our production. We'll have so much more money. Ignoring
so
the
we're
fact
going to
that
get businesses, are we?
Yes, businesses and workers and everything. Like we can, it shouldn't take more than a week to educate these people about our laws, our ethics, our
Well,
moral
no,
code.
they surely have to start businesses, because if they just get jobs that are available in the country, then that's poor people in that country that can't get those jobs. But if if they're starting their own businesses and like growing the economy, okay, sure. I mean, yeah, okay, fine. If loads of fucking businessmen come over, invest in a business and set up a fucking business, and then it's trading, and then employing British people, okay. But if they're just coming over here to take a job, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah, or they'll provide the slave labor force, and British people can make more businesses.
Yeah, I suppose, but that requires small businesses to be viable. I mean, I've brought this up a few times, but I think it was 2008, the G8 was held in Northern Ireland, and they had to paper over the high street because the shops had all closed down, and it looked fucking, run down, because everyone goes to malls out, that are just like a mile or two out of the city, and everything is so much cheaper there. And this is the reason. I mean, they spent £2 million papering over these fucking closed shops. And I went and calculated it. You could open a high street shop for less than like 20 grand. So if they'd spent £2 million giving like 60 people or something 20 grand, then they could have populated an entire high street full of shops that would have grown the economy, except they would have all failed because they're not economically viable, because they provide services that would be provided cheaper over at the fucking mall. So they're just shut down, which is why the high streets are dying anyway. And it's just like, man, just no good can come of this. All they're doing is providing competition for local people. That's it.
Yeah, and again, assuming that these people could somehow be brought into work immediately, which is one hell of a big assumption, even then you run into the same problem of very limited amount of work actually being available. Like in the EU, on average, is 10% people that don't have a job, which is relatively low, everything considered.
On
but
average,
still,
but regionally, what's Spain and Greece like for youth unemployment at the moment? 50% in Greece, wasn't it?
Yep. But then again,
50%.
that's Greece. I mean, we don't talk about Greece anymore. They're just
that's the thing, isn't it? Greece has effectively ceded their sovereignty, haven't they?
Entirely, because they're so deep in debt now that we could literally just repaint their government building in sparkly pig colors, and they wouldn't be able to argue.
That's why Yanis Varoufakis quit, because he wrote a big thing on his blog saying they were pressuring us to unreasonable things I couldn't agree to, so I quit. Yeah. He was the economic minister,
Like, that's the problem for them, because they fucked themselves into a corner so goddamn roughly that the European Union could literally do whatever they wanted with them.
They talked such a big game, but they had nothing in their hand. They had
nothing.
They just had a massive fucking debt around their neck, and it was just like, and literally they had to have another referendum after the decision came back. I can't remember exactly what. I mean, the people still won it, but there was a great deal of dissent because it was a coalition party that came into power, and I think some groups left this coalition over all this. I did do this ages ago, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I just remember they had another referendum because it's such a big political deal, and I mean, I'm not sure. I remember reading somewhere that Italy's prime minister, that Italy is effectively a technocracy at the moment because their prime minister wasn't appointed democratically. Now, I don't know how true that is, but I would have to check. But if that's true, Italy and Greece are effectively not sovereign states anymore.
Well, I haven't heard about Italy, but Greece not being sovereign is probably, yeah.
I might be wrong about this. I'm just going to check.
Their own fault, honestly.
I'm just going to check.
While you're doing that, do you remember when Greece threatened to go to Russia for economic help?
Look at this. In 2011, right? Look at this. New Italian government does not include a single elected politician.
Oh, really?
This is the EU. What was the thing? Oh, facing the daunting challenge of preventing the country from being dragged deeper into the Eurozone debt crisis. Forming a technical administration to do this. And it's just like, I knew I was wrong this. This is what I mean. I'm going to tweet the shit out of this fucking thing. Because, seriously, this is just... fucking exit this shit. Fucking, are you serious? Are you fucking serious? Italy has an appointed government. Italy is a province. I didn't know it was that bad. I did not know it was that bad.
Granted, I do believe that was an emergency government, which means it is legal for them to be non-elected. Same here in Norway and in most
Of course,
countries.
it's an emergency. This is the thing. This is why Hitler burned down the Reichstag.
Oh, that was a Juden, don't you know? Don't you read history?
yeah. Sorry, I forgot. I don't read history. I don't know what I'm talking about.
You're not generally known for burning down buildings.
I love that literally false flag attack and then institute sweeping new powers. it's history repeating itself. You know, it's literally history repeating itself, and I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed that there aren't historians coming out of the woodwork saying, "What the fuck are we doing?"
Well, they're probably busy reading books instead of being on Twitter, I guess.
I guess they're probably busy receiving EU funding. But yeah, I mean, guys, find me a good Remain argument. Look at this. Smithing, millionaire leave campaigner Aaron Banks on our NHS. If it were up to me, I'd privatise the NHS. Aaron Banks, leave campaigner. I don't care. He's not a politician. He's not going to get fucking the NHS privatised. Even if that's what he can campaign for that all he wants, but that doesn't mean that leaving the EU is not also a good idea. Or, you know, even though that's a bad idea, it's not a good idea just because. It's just fucking, it's a smear tactic. And look at this. I mean, this is just a silly thing, but it's like this product should not be sold outside the EU. Oh no, what are we going to do with that chocolate? Oh, we've got Cadbury's. Fuck you. Yeah. Fucking. When I asked what things would be like if we left the EU, the Leave campaign says we just don't know. That's just not good enough. Stronger in. No, oh God, we're not saying there's no uncertainty, Cameron. You fucking idiot. You know, we do have quite a good idea of what would happen, and not all of it is positive, but it does involve the retention of democracy, so you are not replaced by someone appointed from Brussels.
Not to mention, if we're going to go by that argument, do we know what's going to happen if you stay?
Yeah, exactly. If we stay, there's every chance that something even worse will happen by orders of magnitude.
Like, what we know is going to happen is that the EU is going to try for the EU army again. In fact, we know that for sure because that was the entire reason why they had a plan for it that was ready to vote after the Brexit. Now, of course they're going to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, look at this. Just what is the point of this tweet? If David Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn can't convince you to stay in the EU, nothing will. What? You're presenting them. There is no argument. What are they saying? Like, what is the argument? Look, these two people support it. Yeah, but these two people are idiots. One's a communist, and one looks like a bloody buffoon who eats Wensleydale. You know what?
Yes, but there has been zero bear attacks, so
that's true. That's true. Hopefully, this is just a parody account then. In fact, that might well be a parody account. Thank fuck. Suddenly, that all makes sense. In fact, the whole Strong In seems to be a parody campaign. Just again, okay. I mean, is there anything else you want to go over? Because I'm not finding anything worth addressing in any of this, you know, and certainly none of it that changes like the sort of geopolitical and the human rights implications of what's going on. Because that's the thing. I do think that, you know, we consider. I mean, do we not consider democracy a human right? Is that not one of the reasons why we're so opposed to despotic regimes?
Well, again, I think that's the question, isn't it? Are we opposed to despotic regimes? Or are we just going to let history repeat itself?
The Bank of England is right to warn that mortgage rates could rise. Oh my God, there'll be a 10% increase in mortgage rates now. Oh, that's terrible.
You know what else could increase mortgage rates?
Yeah, revolutions.
A few other things, yes. Like, I love that argument, though. It's like, this could possibly happen. Like, okay. And
Yeah, exactly. I'm willing to take the worst case scenario of mortgage rates going up. I mean, it's my cousins are in estate. They're estate agents. They buy and sell houses, and one of them is very successful at it, actually. And I mean, the other one is very successful as well. But I don't want to say too much, but like he was saying to me at the thing, we're saying, oh, we're doing quite well for each other. I was like, oh, I'm doing quite well. And he was like, yeah, I'm doing quite well. I closed the deal, I made £500,000 off it. And I'm like, holy shit, Ricky. I shouldn't have said the name, actually, shit. But yeah, I was just like, holy shit, man, are you serious? He was like, yeah. I was like, fuck. So he's doing quite well. And so I was asking about it, I was saying, so we're getting, I'm thinking about buying a house. Is now a good time, all this sort of thing, And he's like, well, it's inflated. The market's inflated at the moment, so we're expecting it to go down anyway. So it's like, okay, well, so mortgage rates are probably actually going to go down just because the market's it's kind of in a bubble at the moment, apparently. And again, I'm just relating what he said, but they're like, there's a possibility they're going to. But he's like, I don't know, I don't know, we don't know, we won't know until it happens, sort of thing. But there's every chance they'll go down anyway, or they'll go up. Who knows?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with most of these arguments. Is like this could happen, yes, but
yeah, well, that's why they're not saying it will happen, because I mean, otherwise they would. They'd be very, very imperious about it if they could. The NHS will be stronger if we leave the EU. Well, yeah, that's true. The NHS staff stay different. Well, are you sure? I mean, who are these people? How are they accounting for immigrants coming into the country and taking up resources? The NHS could face massive cuts. Why? Why would it face massive cuts?
Government might decide to.
Plug on EU funding for vital medical research. Yeah, and what we're going to do is with the money we give to the EU that they then invest back in our NHS at the cost of an expensive bureaucracy, we're going to take all that money, take it into a big pile in Trafalgar Square, and set fire to it. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to burn it. I mean, what are we missing?
There's a lot of if arguments. But I'll grant you, a lot of our arguments are also if arguments. If a European army, if these things. But the thing is, they're clearly aiming for a European superstate. They say so themselves.
Yes. I mean, yeah, that's literally what David Cameron was saying, it's really important that they what was the thing? To defend them against this thing. Where was it again? I mean, what was the opt out from the EU's aim of ever closer union and stability? Okay, well, I mean, that's the mission. So yeah, they might fail on their own merits because they're useless and ideological, but I don't want to take the risk.
And ever closer, this thing, ever closer cooperation might not lead to stability. In fact, it might lead to the exact opposite.
Yeah, well, I think it's undoubtedly going to, just because of the migrant crisis. I mean, maybe they could have achieved all of this if they hadn't hated the lower classes, if they hadn't let in all of these migrants. If they, and we're not just talking the recent migrant crisis of last year and this year. We're talking like 20 years ago when they started having mass Muslim immigration. Not just Muslim, but you've got Polish and all this sort of thing. You've got mass immigration, but the stuff from outside the EU has been the most destabilizing by a long way. We're really reaping some bad harvest from that. And it's, again, not to demonize these people or anything like that, but you can't look at the things that are happening and saying, well, these are okay. These are terrible things that are happening, and it's communities within these communities that are doing it. And they're sheltered often by these communities. Not necessarily not like they're not under duress. I'm sure that Muslim gangs are quite scary to the regular Muslims, who don't want to be part of a Muslim gang. That's why they're not. I'm sure they're pretty scary people, and a lot of the time they're going to be related. Why would they want to shop them in? Just fucking. It's not worth my hassle to stick my neck out, and then next time I go to the mosque, the Salafist radical preacher is going to fucking single me out, isn't he?
Yeah.
Just. So yeah, I mean, is there anything else you think we can go over? Because I'm trying to be as comprehensive here as possible.
No, honestly, it's been a very long time since Norway has been asked to fuck ourselves by joining the European Union. So I haven't the most up-to-date arguments, but I can't really come up with a good argument other than it could possibly be good at some point in the distant future, which is somewhat dodgy.
Long after we are dead.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Long after our children and grandchildren are dead, it will, might be a good thing. But when the national identities have died, it will be a good thing. And there is just this one single giant European identity. That's when it will be a good thing. But that's not going to be for generations. And there's going to be a lot of strife in the meantime for them to impose that on it. And we know they're authoritarian. They demonstrate that on a daily basis. The very fact they've set up a government that isn't actually decided by democracy is proof of this. And just the idea of Italy, not one fucking person in the government of Italy is elected. I just can't see what the remain is. That's assuming you think your own rights and your own identity, and you think democracy and your ability to have a say in your governance is a good thing. If you want someone to just tell you what to do without your fucking inputs, then okay, good for you, but that's just terrifying, and I don't want that. That's the complete opposite of what I want. And in fact, history, I think, is entirely on my side in having this opinion. And what would you think?
You're on the right side of history, you think?
Well, no. Well, history, the lessons from history are on my side. I would never use the phrase the right side of history because, I mean, if these guys take over, we don't know that we won't end up getting purged at some point. Because what we're saying is to directly undermine the regime. I mean, obviously, it sounds ridiculous, but in 20 years' time, when the EU armies had to suppress numerous right-wing revolutions in various governments with, possibly quite bloody results, it might not sound silly. It might be something that people are afraid to speak out about, and it's not an unlikely event. We can see all of the forces heading this way, and they're manifest. They're everywhere. It's always in the news.
See, now I've discovered your agenda here, Sargon. You're just afraid that in 20 years you're going to be persecuted for the right-wing neo-Nazi you are.
Yes, for my love of democracy and individual rights. It's terrible. I know I'm such a Nazi. But the arguments are just I don't think these people have a great grasp of what we're talking about though. I'd like to talk to the generals. The people who have been to fucking Sandhurst. I'd like to talk to them and think what they think, because a friend of mine went to Sandhurst. He ended up in Iraq commanding 4 Challenger tanks, I think it was. And he was like, yeah, it was awesome. And it was terrifying. And I'm like, I don't blame you. And literally, I couldn't believe this. I'd grown up with this guy. I went to school with this guy when I was a teenager. I used to hang out with him every day. Looking back, he is the last person I would put in charge of, I don't know, 4 tanks or whatever. Just, Jesus, he's just, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the guy. He's really, really, really great friend and everything, but he wasn't a responsible person back then. I mean, obviously he's matured now. And, he went, like I said, he went to Sandhurst, and that's where the last time I have met up with him, but that was the last time we used to really hang out. And but yeah, he went off to Sandhurst and stuff, and he was saying how they learned about all this military history when I was learning about military history just from my own reading. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I was like, yeah, I really enjoy it. And it's like, okay, good. I want to talk to these people. These people who understand what's, the sort of the dynamics of power. What happens when power accrues in certain places under certain conditions, because it's important. It's really important. And I don't think all of these people understand that. I mean, I just don't think they do.
Well, to be fair, with the current education system in most of the civilized world, I would be surprised if any of these knew much about, anything.
Yeah, okay, well, since we seem to have finished everything we have to say, and I'd like to thank the 1,800 or so people who have stuck with us, which is, I'll stop sharing, which is more than I was expecting, but I think there are a lot of people probably concerned about this who don't necessarily have all the information we have. And honestly, with all this, I won't. There are loads of links. I'm not going to put in the description. You can see what I was Googling as I was finding them. So, you'll find the same links, I'm sure. But with any of the historical stuff we were saying, just Google it. Google Agathocles, Google Xanthippus, Google any historical examples you think are worth pulling out. Arch. Arch.
Yeah.
Are you there? Sorry, I know I was going off.
You're dropping a bit for me.
Right, okay. Are there any like historical examples you think are worth looking at to sort of demonstrate? I mean, I think the fall of the Roman Empire is the perfect one, really. But that's
the fall of any empire, really.
Yeah, and that's the specific danger of the EU army. I mean, just the Marian reforms. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at a modern day Marian reform with the EU getting its own army.
Essentially, look at any example where the state gains control over the army, where the army is used for the state's purposes, which is most of the history of the European Union, which, surprisingly enough, is... Oh, not the European Union, but Europe.
Europe, yeah.
Is surprisingly full of war.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like, generally speaking, if the everyday Joe, a peasant, gets to decide, he's not going to want to go off to war and get skewered. If the state gets to decide, well, they have all kinds of axes to grind.
Yes, and all sorts of carrots and sticks to make people do it. You know, just all sorts. Like Hitler and Goering and all that. You're like, oh, don't say the Nazis. Well, they were right about propaganda. They were right about fear. You know, they were right about a lot of things, and they knew that these things were right, which is why they could do what they did. They propagandized everyone to think there was a giant Jewish conspiracy that was all around them and going to invade them. So they had to invade everywhere first.
Yep. The Nazis knew two things, propaganda and fashion.
Yes, they did. Hugo Boss, what an amazing designer who designed the Nazis' uniforms. Wonderful. But yeah, so just there are many, many examples from modern and ancient history. Greek history has a lot of this in. Probably not so much medieval history because of the feudal system, but Greeks weren't under a feudal system. And so you can see this sort of stuff. And the Greeks were very, very fastidious with recording their political histories. Thucydides literally says at the beginning of the history of the Peloponnesian War, this is going to be boring. I can't remember the exact words he says, but he warns everyone going, look, this is going to be dry and factual to the best of my ability, because I was involved with this war on both sides. He was an Athenian who ended up dying in Sparta as a resident. And he'd fought in many of the battles, and the reason he had to leave is because of a defeat. I think it was Amphipoli that he was defeated at and had to flee to Sparta. But I'd have to look it up off the top of my head. But you can see where all of this goes, and they're very concerned about the political structures. And Plato's Republic and Aristotle. I've just finished reading Aristotle's Politics on the advice of Gary Evans. Read more Aristotle, so I did. And it didn't tell me anything I didn't really already know, but it codified it very, very well in ways that are easy to remember. But yeah, so it's just you can see how this is going. You can see how this is going from examples from history because it's happened before. And so yeah, but Arch, thanks so much for joining me, and sorry that I talked so much.
No, it's perfectly fine. This is a talk after all. I do like to hear. The thing is, we're kind of in agreement on this, so.
Well, yeah, I know.
Complicated. Unfortunately, we agree on many things, which is bad.
Well, I think that you would be critical if the evidence we were looking at implied I was wrong.
Oh yes, I will happily argue with you, but not on this one.
Yeah, I don't think I'm wrong on this one either, which is why this is the position I hold. I mean, if none of this was happening, then I wouldn't hold this position, or at least, if it wasn't as nearly as... I just can't get over Italy didn't vote for their own government. That is just mental, isn't it? I can't get over it. And then the right wing rising in Eastern Europe, and they're not even just Eastern Europe either. The right wing rising
Europe in general,
everywhere, but really gaining traction in Eastern Europe because obviously they're closest to the 2 million migrants who have come through. It doesn't surprise me at all, and that puts them. And there is just going to be hell to pay between these two different groups of people, man. It's going to get bad. I think it's going to get bad, and I don't want to fearmonger, but I don't think I'm fearmongering. I think this is a realistic assessment.
Well, we will hopefully not see it.
But yeah, so if you take one thing from this, people in Britain, it's vote leave. Yes, you might have to pay a bit more for your cars. It's either that or losing a democracy. So, again, thank you, Arch. I do appreciate it. I'll leave a link to Arch's channel in the description. Definitely check him out. He does great stuff. And thanks, everyone, for watching.